My mother-in-law insisted on doing a DNA test on my baby because she was darker-skinned, and it ended up causing a huge mess, almost ruining my marriage. I need to vent about something that has been eating me up. My mother-in-law has always been a bit controlling, but this time, she crossed the line. My husband and I recently had a baby, and we've been together for 6 years, married for 3. We've always had a strong and loving relationship, and our little blessing, our daughter, was a dream come true. We were so happy when she was born, and I never imagined anything could cloud that joy. But then came my mother-in-law. I was still groggy from the medication and the trauma of childbirth when my husband was wrapping our baby to help her sleep. That's when my mother-in-law walked into the hospital room. The first thing she said was, "Whose baby is that you're holding?" Her question left me speechless. My husband said it was our baby, and she responded, "Then why is she black?" We were both stunned. My husband looked at me, and we didn't know where that question came from. I explained that dark skin runs in my family and maybe it came from my side. But she ignored me, dismissing it as nonsense and refusing to accept genetics. She insisted that if we both have brown skin, there's no way our daughter could be black. My mother-in-law has always been a difficult person, the kind who wants everything done her way and doesn't hesitate to criticize when things don't meet her standards. Over the years, I've learned to deal with her, but this time she went too far. I was furious at her insinuation that I had cheated on my husband. I was already in enough pain and anxiety from childbirth to deal with her toxicity. I asked her if she was implying that I was cheating on my husband, and she responded, "No, I'm just stating facts. But if you want to confess, go ahead." I looked at my husband, and he took her away, saying we should talk about this later. It was time for mom and baby to rest. He came back to my bed and reassured me not to let her hurtful comments bother me. We figured she was just being malicious, unable to stand my happiness and trying to ruin it. With her remarks, I let it go because we weren't very close to my in-laws. The next day, she visited again, and this time the doctor was in the room for a checkup. As she was leaving, my mother-in-law asked the doctor if there was any chance the baby had been switched because she was black while we were both brown. I was floored by her behavior. The doctor laughed and told her that it was the same baby who had been delivered from me, and that it was too early to determine the baby's skin color. It usually takes 4 to 6 months for it to settle. She left with the doctor, and I didn't see her again, nor did she see the baby. She lives far away, which is a relief, but every time we run into her at social gatherings, she makes sure to poison the air with sarcastic comments about our baby's skin color. When our baby was about 3 months old, we were invited to my brother-in-law's son's birthday. It was the first family event for our daughter, and we were so excited to take her and introduce her to the extended family. My mother-in-law took it as an opportunity to humiliate me in public. She teamed up with some toxic relatives, and they talked badly about my baby and me. One of them said, "Brown and brown, it should be brown or shades of brown, not black. Looks like someone mixed black with brown." I was furious. They made this comment right in front of me to embarrass me. I interrupted, "Excuse me, what do you mean?" My mother-in-law said, "Nothing. We were just talking about colors. What did you think we meant?" They looked at each other and burst into laughter, making me feel uncomfortable. I left the event immediately. A couple of similar incidents followed. The only reason I let it slide at the time was because I was overwhelmed with being a new mom and raising a newborn. But now I think it's time to take action. The last straw came a week ago when our baby turned 6 months. Some of our friends came over to celebrate this milestone with us. Suddenly, my mother-in-law showed up. I didn't want to cause a scene in front of my friends, so I didn't say anything and let her in. She walked in and said, "The skin should have settled by 6 months. Let me see what you've got." Everyone was stunned by her comment. One of my friends was holding the baby and handed her over to my mother-in-law. She looked at the baby and exclaimed, "Oh, still black," and handed her back to my friend. I stood there in shock, not knowing what had just happened or what to say to save face. I decided to hit back, since she had already started the show. My husband was in the kitchen, so I yelled his name and asked him to come out. He rushed out, and I told him that his mother needed biology lessons because clearly she didn't understand genetics. Or maybe she hadn't even been to school, because only an illiterate person could speak such nonsense. My mother-in-law looked at my husband and whispered, "I didn't want to bring this up in front of everyone." She had called herself out, and I interrupted, telling my husband everything about her sarcastic comments. She made a puppy dog face and said that no one would have understood because it was too subtle. She then said, "Now that you've brought it up in front of everyone, let me be clear. I demand a DNA test for the girl, or she won't get the family name." I yelled at her to leave. My husband made it clear that he trusted me and there was no way we were going to do a DNA test on our baby. We didn't care about what my in-laws thought. The thing is, even though my husband trusts and supports me, and I know I've never been unfaithful, part of me wanted to do the DNA test just to shove the results in my mother-in-law's face. But another part of me was holding back, thinking I shouldn't give in to her demands and feed her ego. What do you think is the best way to put my mother-in-law in her place? Update 1. Thank you to everyone for the suggestions. Getting some fresh perspectives really helped. I had the option to avoid the test and cut my mother-in-law out of our lives. We'd already done that, but she wasn't going to stop talking nonsense about me and my baby. The best way to handle this was to do the test, and I've always been one to give her a taste of her own medicine. The results came back, and as expected, there was a 99.999% match with my husband. My husband called her and told her the report was ready and that she should come see it for herself. She came, but not alone. She brought her sisters, who were as evil as she was. They came into the house, hugged my husband, and said, "I'm sorry, my child. I know it hurt, but the truth needed to come out." My husband handed the envelope to my mother-in-law, while her sisters shot me looks like, "Oh, you're still here?" My mother-in-law opened the report and stared at it for a good 5 minutes. I took it from her hands and asked if she needed help understanding it, since it might be difficult for a 6th grade student to grasp. She said, "Wow, look at your confidence. You must have faked it, right?" My husband told her to be quiet, that we were done with her and didn't want her in our lives anymore. She tried to manipulate him, but he told her to leave, that we were cutting her off. She cried and left the house, furious, and her sisters followed her out, looking bitter. She said, "Wow, look at your confidence. You're faking it, right?" My husband stepped in and said we were done with her, that we didn't want her in our lives anymore. She tried to manipulate him, but he told her to leave, saying we were cutting ties with her. She cried and stormed out, furious. Her sisters followed her with bitter faces. But that wasn't all. I sent an email to all extended family members and close relatives, those my mother-in-law had poisoned with lies about the paternity test of my daughter. I attached the DNA report and explained how my mother-in-law had been torturing me, accusing me of infidelity during my crucial postpartum period. Most of them responded with apologies and support. Since then, my mother-in-law has kept a low profile and hasn't appeared in our lives again. My father-in-law also called me to apologize for not keeping my mother-in-law in check. He admitted he had failed to keep the family united. He asked if I would allow her to be part of my baby's life. I told him I had a problem with him not defending me and letting me be slandered, but I understood he didn't want to disrupt the peace in his home. I made it clear that she could see the baby only at my house, and under no circumstances would I share space with her toxic mother. He didn't say much, but a few days ago, he showed up at my house with flowers and baby essentials to make up for the trouble caused. Some people really need to be put in their place. My mother-in-law deserved this, and she brought it on herself. Update 2. Well, who knew there was much more to come? It seems my mother-in-law had been projecting her own insecurities onto me. After that email, many of my father-in-law's relatives reached out to offer their support. They said they knew about her cruelty, that she had always been a narcissistic woman. Some hinted she had a wild streak when she was younger, but no one said anything concrete. It was my father-in-law's sister who let slip that my mother-in-law used to flirt with their neighbor when my father-in-law was deployed in the military. She mentioned a man named Richard, who I had never heard of before. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, so I decided to dig a little deeper into her past, something I'd never thought to do before. I wasn't prepared for what I found. I tried to ask other relatives on my father-in-law's side, and some mentioned Richard. Apparently, they were very close, and there were rumors about their relationship, though nothing was confirmed. They were seen together at restaurants and malls, but she manipulated my father-in-law, and he remained in denial. I was still processing this information and wondering what to do about it when there was another encounter with my mother-in-law. We went to a funeral for a distant relative of my husband's. When she saw me, she made a loud comment. "Well, if you have legs to open, you can falsify any report. These men in labs can manipulate any test results for a cheap thrill. I don't trust these reports." She didn't explicitly mention the paternity test of my daughter, but it was obvious she was bad-mouthing me, implying I had slept with a lab technician to manipulate the DNA report. I'm so tired of this woman. She doesn't even care about being cut out of the baby's life. She clings to her narcissistic self and her accusations. I don't know how much truth there is to the rumors about her wild streak, but it would be like winning the lottery if I could uncover the dirt from her past. The problem is that the rumors go back 30 years, and I don't know how to investigate that. I'd appreciate any suggestions. I really have to do something about this toxic woman. Update 3. Well, thank you for the advice. I got some really good ones. Hiring a private investigator was one option I was considering. In fact, I was in contact with one of the agencies when something else came up. My father-in-law invited us to his retirement party. I declined the invitation because I didn't want to share a space with my mother-in-law. He assured me that she felt guilty for her behavior and wanted to work on the relationship with me. He insisted that I forgive her, and we all meet as a family. I told him what had happened at the funeral. The next day, he asked if there was anything he could do to change my mind. I said I'd consider forgiving my mother-in-law if he had a paternity test done for his children. Both my husband and my father-in-law were confused by my request. My father-in-law said he was sure both of his kids were his. I told him that my husband and I knew our baby was ours, but we had done the test to satisfy his wife's ego, so he had to do it to keep things even. I wanted to see the family united, or we'd be happy on our own. My husband tried to understand my reasoning, but I made it clear that my demand was non-negotiable. My father-in-law said, "Well, if that's really what you want, we can do it for you. There's nothing to lose, right?" I replied, "Well, I guess so. Time will tell." My father-in-law and husband gave their samples the same day. I also asked if my sister-in-law could take the test. They called her, but she refused to give her sample, saying she was done with this nonsense. I didn't keep my hopes high as the odds were very low, but if my husband was the son and my sister-in-law wasn't, and if my mother-in-law had an affair but never had a baby with her lover, well, I was determined to humiliate her one way or another. If this DNA test came back in my mother-in-law's favor, I'd have something else planned for her. My suspicion became partially true even before the results came out. When my father-in-law came home and told her about the paternity test, she went crazy. She yelled at him for doing the test without her consent and insisted that he cancel. Her reason was that she didn't want to feed my ego, but this time she couldn't manipulate my father-in-law, and he realized there was something off. He said he wouldn't cancel it, and now they were just waiting for the report. My mother-in-law called my husband and tried to emotionally manipulate him, saying, "You don't trust your mother." My husband responded, "I trust you, and I also trust my wife. But we did the test just to satisfy your ego. Let's admit it, it's a formality." She said it was feeding my ego and that it should be canceled. My husband asked, "What's the point of canceling it? We've already paid and given the sample. Let's see the results and finish this." When I saw her desperation, I knew I had hit a nerve. To divert everyone's attention, she pretended to be sick, claiming she slipped in the shower and fractured her back and knees. Unfortunately, that backfired and she ended up bedridden. I went to see her and said, "It's sad that you're confined to bed. Otherwise, you could have also opened your legs and manipulated the results." She insulted me, and I laughed in her face. Knew what was coming. I don't understand why she didn't confess and let my father-in-law find out through the report. As expected, the report showed a 0.9% genetic match between my father-in-law and my husband, meaning he wasn't his father. I knew how the results would come out and had been tracking it through the serial number. The day the results were supposed to come out, I went to my mother-in-law's house to witness the drama in person. When I arrived, I handed the report to my father-in-law, who became furious and threw it in my mother-in-law's face. She pretended not to understand what it said, so I picked it up and said, "It means my father-in-law is not your son's father." I wasn't sure about the daughter part, but I couldn't help but laugh inside. If karma exists, this is how it should work. My mother-in-law acted as if she fainted from the shock. I called my husband and told him that his mother had passed out, so he should come home from work immediately. He arrived and saw the report for himself. My father-in-law forced my mother-in-law to confess, but she kept denying it, saying she didn't know how that result came about. She even blamed me for manipulating the report to get back at her. I told her, "If you don't trust this hospital, you can have it tested at a few other places to rule out any error or manipulation." She refused to do that or accept the report. After a lot of back and forth, my father-in-law shouted, "What is this?" There was a deathly silence in the room. My mother-in-law broke down in tears and said she would confess everything, but she wanted me to leave. I grabbed my purse and stood up, but my father-in-law said, "She's not going anywhere. You humiliated her in front of the world. Now she stays right here." She started crying and confessed that she had been having an affair with the neighbor, Richard, while my father-in-law was away. She said she was alone. My husband and father-in-law looked at her in shock. My husband stormed out and I followed him. He just drove off without me. I went back home. My mission was complete. I waited for my husband until 10 p.m. before calling him. He rejected the call and I gave him space. I fell asleep while putting my baby to bed. I don't know when he came home, but when he did, I hugged him while he slept. He whispered, "You knew, didn't you?" I nodded and held him tightly. The next morning, my husband had a fever and called in sick. He refused to leave the bed, saying he was going through an existential crisis. I made an appointment for therapy for him, hoping it would help him accept his reality. Meanwhile, my father-in-law went to see my sister-in-law and showed her the report. She was furious. She did the test too, and it came back with a 99% match, so she is my father-in-law's daughter, but my husband is Richard's son. The thing is, no one knows where Richard is, not even my mother-in-law. She never even told him that my husband was her son because he was careless and could have caused chaos in my mother-in-law's perfect family. So, she quietly pushed him out of her life. At this point, I'm not sure if my husband even wants to reconcile with his biological father. However, a couple of days ago, my father-in-law came to our house and broke down. He said he didn't know how to have this conversation. I got up to give them space to talk as father and son, but he insisted I stay to ease the discomfort. I suggested, maybe we could continue as we are, respecting and loving each other as human beings, without giving our relationship a label. My father-in-law mentioned that he went to couples therapy with my mother-in-law, where she confessed she had projected her insecurities onto me. She thought I had deceived my husband because our daughter had dark skin, just as she had cheated on him. Fortunately, her affair never came to light because my husband inherited all of his mother's traits, not Richard's. I don't know how the relationship between my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband will evolve from here, but I feel satisfied knowing the truth behind my mother-in-law's mask. My father-in-law confided this trauma to his sister, the same one who gave me the tip about my mother-in-law's affair with Richard. She called me yesterday and applauded me for going beyond to uncover this truth. She said she had taken down my mother-in-law for both of us, as my mother-in-law had always been cruel to her. It's only a matter of time before the entire family and relatives learn the truth about her. When my mother-in-law was confessing, I felt bad for her. But once I saw the whole picture, I think she brought this on herself. She could have stayed silent, as she had for years, instead of picking on me for my baby's skin color. She dug her own grave, and now she has to lie in it. Update 4. Well, we're now dealing with a divorce between my father-in-law and mother-in-law. For now, my husband wants to keep his father in his life, and will also keep him close to our daughter. He has always considered him his father, and doesn't see why that should change now. My husband doesn't want to contact Richard, as he doesn't see the point after all these years, and we don't even know if he's still alive. My mother-in-law, of course, is devastated. She never expected things to escalate this way, but she brought it on herself. She had many chances to stop this and let go of her nonsense, but she pushed until she drew out my vengeful side. She had to push a lot because I had just become a mother and had no interest in this drama, but she pressed all the right buttons to make the truth explode in her face. Seeing her mistake wasn't enough for her, so she had to make me the guilty one in her failed marriage. Of course, opening her legs for the neighbor while her husband fought for the country wasn't the problem. But in her twisted mind, which I don't think has much gray matter, she sees me as the villain. The only one who thinks that way is her, though. Even the family has distanced themselves from her. My husband doesn't speak to her, and neither does my sister-in-law. But you know, when an animal is cornered, it becomes more dangerous. So my mother-in-law tried something as a last resort. A week ago, I began to notice fake accounts on social media leaving negative and offensive comments on my public posts. At first, I thought it might be a coincidence, but then I started receiving private messages full of insults and baseless accusations about my character and my relationship with my husband. These messages mentioned personal details only someone close to the family could know. Then, one night, I received a message from an anonymous profile that said, "Soon everyone will know the truth about you. You're nothing but an imposter and a manipulator. Your time will come." I realized this wasn't just a random attack from an internet troll. There was something more behind it. I decided to investigate and noticed that several of the profiles attacking me were following the same accounts of friends and family. The most surprising part was that one of these anonymous profiles was being followed by my mother-in-law. With this new suspicion, I confronted her directly. I called her and asked if she knew anything about these attacks. Of course, she denied everything, saying she had no idea what I was talking about and that someone must be trying to sow discord between us. But I knew, and even my husband knew, that she had been creating fake profiles, thinking no one would catch her. With this evidence in hand, I organized a family meeting and presented all the information. My mother-in-law tried once more to deny everything, but this time the evidence was irrefutable. My husband, furious and hurt, told his mother that she had gone too far, and that from that moment on, she was completely out of our lives. He warned her that if she continued to interfere, we would seek a restraining order. After that, no one speaks to her, and my father-in-law has left the house until the divorce is final and they reach an arrangement regarding her. This woman doesn't seem to know when to stop because she still tries to attack me. I don't know what she hopes to achieve from all this, as attacking me won't change the fact of her infidelity. My husband thinks she may be starting to develop senile dementia or something similar because she never exhibited these behaviors before, at least not to this extreme. She probably needs attention, but now no one in the family wants to help her. I don't know if anyone from her side of the family will step up, but that's no longer my problem. Update 5. Well, my husband's theory that she might have dementia is becoming more likely after what happened a few days ago. She came to the house, but she wasn't in a good state. She was wearing dirty clothes and wasn't presentable at all. She knocked on the door and started shouting things like, "You have a black lover. Don't lie to me." We called the police, and when they arrived and did a preliminary check, they decided it was best to take her to a facility for care because she was clearly not in her right mind. Even when the police arrived, she kept rambling incoherently. She even said that the father of my daughter was Richard. I don't know if it was because Richard was a man of color or if her mind had just mixed up all her ideas. I'll admit I did feel a bit of pity seeing her like that, but even though what she said still affects me, at least now she'll be getting treatment and she'll be away from me for a while. Feeling pity doesn't mean I forgive her or anything like that. Nothing changes about the past with or without illness. Am I the asshole for not greeting my mom's partner? I, 18M, have a really good relationship with my mom's partner. He visits our house regularly, and he's always nice and respectful. I've never had any issues with him, and I usually greet him and have small conversations when he comes over. The other day, however, I had a really rough day and was completely wiped out. I've been feeling burnt out from juggling school, work, and commuting, and it all came to a head that day. When I came home, I greeted my family but was just really tired, so I told them I was exhausted and went straight to my room to relax. I explained I wasn't feeling great and needed some space. The next day, my mom's partner came over while I was still in bed. I had a terrible headache and was really out of it, so I kept waking up but kept falling back asleep. My mom came in a couple of times asking if I could come downstairs and hang out, but I told her, no, thank you, because I really didn't feel up to it. By the time I fully woke up around noon, I wasn't feeling great, but I got up to quickly finish some schoolwork and then went back to sleep again. I didn't really feel like eating, and I spent most of the day in bed. Later in the evening, when I finally got the energy to go downstairs, I noticed that my mom's partner had already left. My mom was upset with me for not greeting him when he was here and is now ignoring me. She scolded me and I honestly feel bad, but it wasn't intentional. I just wasn't in the right mental or physical state to engage with anyone. So, AITA for not greeting my mom's partner when he visited? Am I the asshole for telling my mom to stop overstepping on my privacy and making her cry? I'm a 16-year-old girl, 16F, and I live with my mom after my parents got divorced. I don't really mind living with her because I spend time with both of my parents, but sometimes my mom does things that really annoy me. She works at a hospital, so she has a pretty strange schedule. When she comes home in the early hours of the morning, I'm already getting ready to leave for school. The problem started a couple of days ago. I came home from school and noticed right away that something was off. My room was usually neat and organized, but when I walked in, I could tell it had been disturbed. My mom had gone through my room while I was at school. I keep my room tidy, so I noticed the disorganization immediately. I didn't mention it to her at first, but I was really fed up with her invading my privacy like that. Turns out she found some notes from someone I've been dating. Now, she won't stop talking about him, calling him my secret lover and asking a ton of questions. It's driving me crazy because, honestly, she would never have known about him if she hadn't gone through my things. I don't usually hide things from her, but I don't appreciate her snooping around in my personal space. Yesterday, I couldn't take it anymore and just told her, "Can you please stop going through my things?" She looked really hurt when I said that. Her response was something like, "Well, I'm your mother, and that's just what mothers do." To be honest, that really pissed me off. I tried to explain that I would have told her about him eventually, but I can't share things with her when she's always overstepping my boundaries. She got really angry and said that if I wasn't so closed off and didn't keep things from her, then she wouldn't have to invade my privacy. I was honestly shocked. I told her, "What did you expect me to do when you're always pushing me to tell you everything and going through my room?" I guess that was a bit harsh, but I was frustrated. Then, she started crying. Immediately, I felt guilty for making her cry. She told me that I never spend time with her, and that she felt like she was losing me because I'm growing up so fast and she doesn't need me anymore. She said she was failing as a mother. That confused me because she's been a good mom to me, and I tried to comfort her, but she wouldn't let me. She just kept crying and walked away from me. Now I feel terrible. I've been feeling guilty ever since. My mom hasn't spoken to me since the argument, and when she came home this morning, she still wasn't talking to me. I texted my dad about the situation, and he told me that my mom was being manipulative and asked if I wanted him to come get me. But I don't feel like my mom is being manipulative. I'm just not sure how I feel right now. I've been feeling really conflicted, and part of me wants to go to her and apologize for what I said, but I also feel like I was justified in asking her to respect my privacy. I just don't know what to do. Am I the asshole for making my mom cry, or was I right to stand up for my boundaries? Am I the asshole for not letting my ex-roommate use my Amazon Prime account? I, 18F, was roommates with J, 18F, for part of our first semester in college. In the beginning, everything was great. We hung out a lot, ate together, talked all night, and went shopping. However, things started to change after we both rushed for sororities. I got into the one she wanted, but I ended up getting into a different one. From that point on, she started being a little more distant, though we were still friendly. To give some context, on our shared TV, I paid for several streaming services: Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, and Peacock. Jay's parents paid for Max, formerly HBO Max, and Netflix. I didn't mind this arrangement at all because I had some money saved up from a young age and I wanted to enjoy college without worrying about extra expenses. A few weeks into the semester, I found out that Jay had to move out due to health reasons. She had some issues with certain foods and needed to cook for herself, which was fair, though I was a bit upset that she only told me a week before she moved out. She also left all the packing for me to do, while she spent time with her sorority friends. I didn't make a big deal out of it and packed up her stuff because I wanted to be nice. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and she reached out to ask me to log out of her Netflix and Max accounts, which I hadn't used since she moved out. I agreed and did that right away. Then, later that same week, I noticed something strange on my Amazon account. I saw that a gift card I had on there was used up, and some movies were rented. Since I hadn't rented them, I looked into it and saw that Jay had been using my Amazon Prime account. I texted her and asked if she had rented the movies, and she admitted that she did. I asked why she was on my account, and she said that she didn't have an Amazon account of her own and wanted to use mine. I told her that it wasn't fair for her to use my account when I had to log out of her Netflix and Max accounts. She argued that it was different because Netflix was hers but Amazon Prime was ours, meaning she felt entitled to use it even though it was my account and I was the one paying for it. I told her that if she didn't stop using my account, I'd figure out a way to kick her off myself. She refused, so I called my dad for help, and we found a way to secure my account. Jay then called me, screaming that I ruined her movie night with her friends. I told her that if she wanted to watch movies, she should pay for her own account. Now I'm feeling conflicted. I don't think I did anything wrong, but I'm wondering if I was too harsh. Was I wrong for not letting my ex-roommate use my Amazon Prime account? Am I the asshole for telling my family they hurt me on Thanksgiving? I'm a woman in my 50s, F50 plus, and I have 2 siblings, a brother, M50 plus, and a sister, F50. My relationship with my brother has always been strained, though we've managed to make it work over the years. We have very different political views, with him being extremely conservative, especially regarding traditional gender roles. He believes women should be taken care of. A few years ago, I did something that apparently upset someone in the family, but no one has ever clearly told me what it was. From what I've gathered, it seems to have been my brother's wife, Sil, who is angry with me, possibly on behalf of my niece, but no one has come out and said it directly. I've been asked to call and apologize, but I've refused because I don't know what I'm apologizing for. Over time, things have gotten worse. I'm not welcome at my brother's house anymore, and after receiving a particularly harsh email from him, I blocked him. I've tried reaching out to my niece and even my brother, but I've received no response. Over the years, I've come to learn that the rest of the family gets together at various times, but never with me. They always say it's so the cousins can hang out, and since I don't have kids, I'm not invited. This year, I found out the whole family got together for Thanksgiving, except me. The only reason I knew was because I saw Facebook posts from the event. Honestly, it felt like a gut punch. On Thanksgiving Day, I sent a text to my mom and sister saying that I was happy they were all together. I truly was, especially for my mom's sake. But I just wanted them to realize how much it hurt to be left out and even worse, to find out on Facebook. I haven't heard back from anyone. I know my message wasn't nasty, but I sent it on Thanksgiving afternoon, so I'm sure it caused some upset. Now, I'm wondering if I owe them an apology. Maybe I shouldn't have sent it on Thanksgiving, but it hurt so much. It did make me feel a bit better knowing they were aware of how hurt I felt, but maybe I was just spreading my hurt around, which could have been crappy of me. So, my question is, am I the asshole for sending that message at all? Was it wrong to send it on Thanksgiving? Clarifying some guesses about why my SIL might be upset. She thinks I didn't grieve enough when my father passed away. She thinks I treat their adopted daughter differently from their son, though it was based on my brother's request due to my niece's behavior. Politics. She has explicitly said politics are not the issue. One example of sibling rivalry. I was in law enforcement for a while as a volunteer reserve deputy. My brother went off on a rant about how all law enforcement officers were bad and everyone should have guns. I corrected him, told him about my volunteer range hours, and asked that we change the subject because I had just lost a colleague in the line of duty and was still grieving. He didn't stop, and I eventually got up and left. He yelled after me, saying I couldn't handle it, and later I was told it was my fault for arguing with him. My question is, am I the asshole for expressing my hurt feelings on Thanksgiving? Did I handle it wrong? Am I the asshole for giving my misogynistic brother-in-law the meat chopper on his and my sister's Christmas list? I, 27F, need some advice because I'm torn on whether I'm being petty or just standing up for myself. For Christmas this year, my siblings and I are doing a secret Santa gift exchange instead of buying individual gifts. We all made wish lists, and the couples count as one unit for this purpose, which makes me the only single person among my siblings. I get along with all of my in-laws except for one person. My sister's husband, Jay, 21M. My sister, 21F, married Jay this past summer. They got together after knowing each other for only about 6 months, and they were married after a whirlwind engagement. While I've seen relationships like this work out for some, I had a bad gut feeling about Jay from the start. To give a bit of background, Jay was already in a relationship when he met my sister on a dating app. His girlfriend had gone overseas for some volunteer work, and Jay decided it was okay to get back on dating apps while she was away. When my sister and Jay decided to get together, he actually had her write the breakup email to his girlfriend. The girlfriend was understandably upset. Despite the short time they'd been together, my sister and Jay started planning their honeymoon only a month into their relationship, and 4 months later, they were engaged. Ever since then, I've seen some pretty concerning behavior. Jay is obsessed with appearances and money. He stole $150 from my sister before they were married and refused to give it back, claiming it was justified because he'd bought her so many things. At the time, she was finishing school and struggling to pay off student loans. Meanwhile, Jay has never even been to college and has basically coasted through life with few financial worries. Another thing is that Jay has been openly misogynistic, which really rubs me the wrong way. Despite both my sister and him working full-time, he makes her do all the cooking and cleaning. She's the one expected to handle the household chores, while he doesn't lift a finger. This kind of attitude is just one of many red flags that have made me uncomfortable with their marriage. Now, here's where I need advice. On their Christmas wish list, they've requested a meat chopper. Since I'm their secret Santa, I'm tasked with buying gifts for both of them. While I want to be thoughtful and avoid the expensive gifts on their list, like a massager, which I know Jay would use, and I don't feel like rewarding him for being a misogynist, I don't want to buy them something too generic either. So, I'm thinking of giving Jay the meat chopper, and then I'll get my sister some self-care gifts. The meat chopper is definitely something my sister would use, but Jay is unlikely to even touch it, especially since it's not a luxury item or anything related to his image. The real reason I want to give him the meat chopper, though, is because of how much he disregards my sister. It's a small but deliberate way to point out how ridiculous and petty his priorities are. He can't really complain about it since it's on their list, right? But I'm still wondering, would I be the asshole if I went ahead with this gift choice? Some background details. Jay stole $150 from my sister before they were married, claiming it was justified because he'd bought her so many things. He mocks her for not finishing college while he has never had to struggle or work hard for anything. He does not treat her as an equal partner in the relationship. She handles all the cooking and cleaning, while he sits back and criticizes her for things that aren't even true. On their list, Jay is the one who asked for the meat chopper, and I suspect he only included it because it's something my sister would use, not because he has any interest in cooking. It feels a bit like a compromise gift between them, even though he'll probably never use it. A few additional considerations. I don't want my sister to feel like I'm making her uncomfortable or putting her in an awkward position, but I also want to subtly stand up for her without directly confronting Jay. Part of me feels like this is just a small way of showing Jay that I'm aware of his behavior, but not in an overt or aggressive way. Will he take it out on my sister if he doesn't like the gift? Will it make their dynamic even worse? I'm genuinely concerned about how it will affect her, especially since she's already dealing with so much of his nonsense. I really just don't want to start unnecessary drama, but I also want to avoid rewarding his bad behavior. Am I being too petty? Or am I justified in making this gift choice? TLDR Wibda, would I be the asshole for gifting my misogynistic brother-in-law the meat chopper that was on his and my sister's Christmas list, knowing he'll likely never use it but my sister would? Edit. I just wanted to add a bit more context after reading some of the comments. I get that it could make things awkward between my sister and me if he throws a tantrum about the gift, but I've already spoken to my other siblings, and they all said they wouldn't have wanted to get them anything. I'm really trying to stay neutral, but I do want to take a stand without causing unnecessary tension. Am I the asshole for making my boyfriend sleep in the living room after his comments about my body and food choices? To give you some background, I, 25F, have been in a relationship with my boyfriend, 26M, for about 11 months now. Throughout our time together, I've been very open with him about my insecurities, especially when it comes to my body. I've never been obese, but I'm not exactly petite either. I've always had a few extra pounds, and although I'm not overweight, I struggle with feeling comfortable in my own skin. I'm 5 feet 11 inches, and I've been taller and bigger than most girls since I was younger. I've never had a perfect body, and I've had to deal with the fact that I don't have a tiny waist or a flat stomach. I'm just regular. Because of this, I'm really sensitive when it comes to any comments about my weight or body shape. A little context on my relationship with food. I have been using a food tracking app, MyFitnessPal, for a while now, trying to eat healthier and stay active. I'm definitely not perfect, but I've been trying to make better choices. I'm not overly obsessed with my weight, but I am focused on my overall health, especially because I struggle with polycystic ovary syndrome, POS, which can mess with my metabolism and make it harder for me to lose weight. So, even when I do indulge or make choices that aren't perfect, I try not to beat myself up about it. Tonight, my boyfriend and I were both working late, and after a long day, I decided to grab a pizza from Hungry Howie's. I had only eaten 2 slices, and the rest I put in the fridge for later. When my boyfriend got home, he saw the pizza box and made a comment like, "Why did you get that big box? Who's going to eat all that?" Now, he's not a huge fan of pizza, especially because he doesn't like the sauce, but I didn't think much of it at first. I just said, "I can eat pizza for days," meaning that I would eat it over a couple of days until I got tired of it. But then he started opening his mouth as if he was going to say something else, and after some back and forth, he finally admitted that he was going to say he thought I'd been looking really good lately because I'd been tracking everything I ate, and now he was surprised I was going to eat an entire pizza by myself. Honestly, I was furious. First off, I hadn't even eaten most of the pizza. I had only eaten 2 slices, and it was literally the only thing I'd eaten all day after working a long shift. But his implication that I was going to eat the whole thing just felt so judgmental. It wasn't just the comment about the pizza, but it felt like he was pointing out how I was somehow slipping up when, in reality, I was just having a normal meal after a busy day. I told him that I didn't want him to comment on my body or what I ate anymore. It wasn't okay, and I didn't want to hear that kind of judgment from my partner. Then, I told him to go sleep in the living room for the night because I was so upset. Now, he's acting like I'm the one in the wrong, saying that I've previously told him I wanted a partner who could help me eat healthier and get active. Yes, that's true. I want someone supportive, but not someone who makes me feel gross or judged for having a couple of slices of pizza when I'm just doing my best to take care of myself. A little more context. I'm 5 feet 11 inches and I fluctuated between 180 and 200 pounds at my heaviest, but it's not like you can really tell when my weight changes. It tends to be pretty evenly distributed across my frame. The number on the scale doesn't bother me that much. I just want to feel healthier overall. And even though I may not make the healthiest choices all the time, I know that my weight can sometimes fluctuate because of my PCOS, and I try to be kind to myself about it. Some of the comments on this post have really upset me, but I just wanted to add that if I were bigger, that doesn't mean people have the right to comment on it or shame me. I'm doing the best I can, and I'd appreciate some respect in return. So, am I the asshole for making my boyfriend sleep in the living room after his comments about my food and body? Am I the asshole for wanting quiet in the quiet zone of the ICE? I, 28F, travel frequently for work, often taking long train rides on the German ICE, sometimes lasting between 5 to 8 hours. Due to my neurodivergence, I struggle with regulating my emotions and thoughts, and I'm hypersensitive to stimuli, especially sounds and noise. For this reason, I always book a seat in the quiet car on the train, and I even pay extra for the privilege. I count on these spaces to be, well, quiet. However, almost every time I travel, there are people who didn't book the quiet car invading the space. They talk loudly on the phone, laugh obnoxiously, or bring their kids who can scream and make noise. I use noise-canceling headphones, but they don't block out loud voices or screaming, no matter how much music I try to drown the noise with. As you can imagine, this is incredibly stressful for me. The noise and chaos often build up to the point where I get severe anxiety, panic attacks, and even rage. I sometimes end up leaving my seat to go to the bathroom or to the empty restaurant car just to escape the noise. On my most recent trip, I decided to finally muster up the courage to speak up. I asked a group of people who were speaking loudly and laughing if they could keep it down. They did for a bit, but then I tried again later on my return journey. This time, I confronted a couple who had a screaming child. I told them that children don't belong in the quiet car and that they should move to another car, as there were plenty of seats available. The mother told me I should be more tolerant, arguing that I was once a child too. I explained that I wasn't against children, but it's unreasonable to expect the quiet car to be the place for them, especially when they're loud. I even told her that my noise-canceling headphones weren't enough to block out the sound, and I still could hear them. She basically dismissed me, telling me to shut up and accusing me of being unreasonable because I didn't know what it's like to have kids. This has left me wondering if I'm in the wrong. I see this happen on every train ride I take, but no one else seems to speak up, and I always feel like I'm the only one bothered by it. Now, I'm questioning if I should just let it go and stop complaining. Update * after this incident. I reached out to Deutsche Bahn for clarification. Here's what they told me. I took notes. 1. Children in the quiet zone. They said that children should not be in the quiet zones because it's unreasonable to expect a child to regulate their volume. It's up to the parents to use common sense and respect the quiet zone rules. However, they don't specifically ban children, but rather rely on visual cues like the pest sign, the Ruhebereich, quiet zone, sign, and the word silence in multiple languages. 2. Noise policies. They also said that although they don't list everything, like musical instruments or TVs, the rules are clear that no noise is allowed in the quiet zones. There have been multiple complaints about this issue, and they said it's a problem reflecting a lack of common decency and good manners in society. They encouraged me to report such behavior to the train crew, as they're trained to handle situations like this, and they can even remove people from the train if necessary. The representative added that even without being neurodivergent, they understood how frustrating it is when people disregard common etiquette. So, after hearing this, I'm now even more frustrated. I'm starting to feel like I'm being unreasonable, but at the same time, I've paid for this service and am simply trying to maintain my own mental health and sanity. So, am I the asshole for wanting quiet in the quiet zone of the ICE? Am I the asshole for wanting quiet in the quiet zone of the ICE? I, 28F, travel frequently for work, often taking long train rides on the German ICE, sometimes lasting between 5 to 8 hours. Due to my neurodivergence, I struggle with regulating my emotions and thoughts, and I'm hypersensitive to stimuli, especially sounds and noise. For this reason, I always book a seat in the quiet car on the train, and I even pay extra for the privilege. I count on these spaces to be, well, quiet. However, almost every time I travel, there are people who didn't book the quiet car invading the space. They talk loudly on the phone, laugh obnoxiously, or bring their kids who can scream and make noise. I use noise-canceling headphones, but they don't block out loud voices or screaming, no matter how much music I try to drown the noise with. As you can imagine, this is incredibly stressful for me. The noise and chaos often build up to the point where I get severe anxiety, panic attacks, and even rage. I sometimes end up leaving my seat to go to the bathroom or to the empty restaurant car just to escape the noise. On my most recent trip, I decided to finally muster up the courage to speak up. I asked a group of people who were speaking loudly and laughing if they could keep it down. They did for a bit, but then I tried again later on my return journey. This time, I confronted a couple who had a screaming child. I told them that children don't belong in the quiet car and that they should move to another car, as there were plenty of seats available. The mother told me I should be more tolerant, arguing that I was once a child too. I explained that I wasn't against children, but it's unreasonable to expect the quiet car to be the place for them, especially when they're loud. I even told her that my noise-canceling headphones weren't enough to block out the sound, and I still could hear them. She basically dismissed me, telling me to shut up and accusing me of being unreasonable because I didn't know what it's like to have kids. This has left me wondering if I'm in the wrong. I see this happen on every train ride I take, but no one else seems to speak up, and I always feel like I'm the only one bothered by it. Now, I'm questioning if I should just let it go and stop complaining. Update * after this incident. I reached out to Deutsche Bahn for clarification. Here's what they told me. I took notes. 1. Children in the quiet zone. They said that children should not be in the quiet zones because it's unreasonable to expect a child to regulate their volume. It's up to the parents to use common sense and respect the quiet zone rules. However, they don't specifically ban children, but rather rely on visual cues like the pest sign, the Ruhebereich, quiet zone, sign, and the word silence in multiple languages. 2. Noise policies. They also said that although they don't list everything, like musical instruments or TVs, the rules are clear that no noise is allowed in the quiet zones. There have been multiple complaints about this issue, and they said it's a problem reflecting a lack of common decency and good manners in society. They encouraged me to report such behavior to the train crew, as they're trained to handle situations like this, and they can even remove people from the train if necessary. The representative added that even without being neurodivergent, they understood how frustrating it is when people disregard common etiquette. So, after hearing this, I'm now even more frustrated. I'm starting to feel like I'm being unreasonable, but at the same time, I've paid for this service and am simply trying to maintain my own mental health and sanity. So, am I the asshole for wanting quiet in the quiet zone of the ICE? Am I the asshole for suggesting my brother reevaluate his marriage? To maintain anonymity, I've changed names and a few details, but the situation I'm about to describe happened during a family trip to see our favorite football team. There's a bigger backstory here, but this incident is the key focus. For context, I, 30F, am the oldest sibling in my family, which includes my parents, my 2 brothers, David, late 30s, and Greg, early 20s, and my sister, Rachel, early 20s. Greg's wife, Beth, and their infant son also joined us for the trip, but she wasn't originally part of the plan. The trip was meant to be a rare chance for the whole family to get together, and we had all planned to stay in an Airbnb. However, Beth insisted on coming along, saying she couldn't be without Greg for more than a day. So Greg last minute changed the Airbnb booking to accommodate her and the baby. We all arrived the night before the game and had a nice time together. On game day, we went to the stadium to tailgate and watch the game while Beth stayed back with the baby. She was watching her favorite team. They lost, and started texting Greg about how the baby had a diaper blowout, calling it an emergency. Greg's phone died while we were at the game, but before that, Beth had been accusing him of being a bad father for not being there. To give you more context, Greg is actually a great father. He's very hands-on, attentive, and involved with their son. Much more than I expected when he first became a parent. So, when Beth sent those messages, accusing him of being a bad father for not handling a non-emergency diaper issue, it felt totally unfair. After the game, as we were driving back to the Airbnb, Greg was able to charge his phone and saw over 50 texts from Beth. She had also been texting David, threatening to divorce Greg if he didn't respond. When Greg finally called her back, she hung up on him and told him to read the texts. Despite knowing that Greg was driving and couldn't talk, she kept calling and texting him, ranting about her team's loss, the diaper blowout, and how terrible her day had been. At one point, she even FaceTimed him, handed the baby the phone and said, "Here, deal with this little shit because I can't." Greg tried his best to stay calm and explained that he was driving and would be home soon to help, but Beth continued her barrage of calls and texts. Eventually, Greg snapped and told her they needed a private conversation once he was home. In front of our family, he said, "You need to be a mother. You need to handle our child alone sometimes. Don't call something an emergency unless it is one. A diaper blowout isn't an emergency. Grow up, clean him up, and move on. At that point, I told Greg, I wouldn't want to be with someone who can't handle being a parent alone for a few hours. You let her go out with friends, but she can't handle one day without threatening divorce and calling you a bad father. You might need to rethink this marriage. Since then, Greg has been distant with me, and my siblings and parents think I was out of line. They've said I should have stayed out of it and that it's not my place to suggest he reevaluate his marriage. However, I stand by my opinion. Beth's behavior has been a consistent issue before and after they got married, and it's only gotten worse. I don't think it's healthy for Greg to constantly feel like he's walking on eggshells or that he's expected to drop everything over minor situations. So, am I the asshole for suggesting my brother reconsider his marriage? This one is tricky. On one hand, it sounds like you were trying to offer your brother a perspective that could help him, especially if this dynamic is something that's been troubling him for a while. However, it's also possible that your comment came off as judgmental or as overstepping into his personal relationship. Relationships can be complex, and sometimes people need to come to their own conclusions rather than having family members intervene too directly. If your brother hasn't explicitly asked for advice or hasn't been showing signs that he's unhappy in his marriage, your suggestion could have unintentionally made him feel unsupported or like his decisions weren't being respected. However, if he has confided in you before about his frustrations with Beth, your comment might have been coming from a place of care and concern. Ultimately, it's about your brother's choice on how he wants to handle his relationship. He may appreciate the concern, but at the end of the day, it's his decision whether or not to reevaluate his marriage. Verdict: everyone sucks here. You're not the outright asshole, but it may have been better to let Greg come to his own conclusions, especially if he hasn't been asking for advice. However, Beth's behavior is undeniably problematic, and Greg does deserve support in dealing with it. Am I the asshole for getting a kitchen cart without clearing it with my roommate first? I live in a house with 2 roommates, and while we have a decent-sized kitchen, the counter space is seriously lacking. My roommate Helen uses up a lot of it with her microwave, sous vide machine, and toaster oven. These gadgets take up a ton of space, leaving me with very little room for my cooking and ingredient prep. I also enjoy baking bread, which is really hard to do when there's barely any counter space left to knead dough. After struggling with the lack of space, I decided to buy a rolling kitchen cart to give me extra room for food prep and cooking. I thought it was a practical solution to our shared space problem. However, when Helen saw it, she got really upset and assumed it was a personal jab at her. She thinks that I got the cart specifically to make a point about her occupying too much of the kitchen. A bit more context: Helen has an autoimmune disorder that affects her diet, and she bought the sous vide machine and toaster oven because they help her prepare food that's safe for her to eat. This has led to several arguments between us, as she often uses these gadgets only once or twice a week, but they take up a large portion of the kitchen all the time. Meanwhile, I'm left with little space to prepare my meals and store my appliances. We've even had a disagreement over whether I should store my rice cooker when I'm not using it. The main issue is that whenever we try to talk about how to share the kitchen space, Helen uses her illness to justify the disproportionate space she takes up. It feels like her needs always trump mine and my other roommates, and that leaves me frustrated. Since I bought the cart, Helen has been avoiding me, and now she's asking if I can return it because she sees it as a passive-aggressive act. I bought the cart to solve a problem I'm facing in the kitchen. With the holidays coming up and a lot of baking ahead, I really need the extra space. But now I'm second-guessing whether I should have cleared the purchase with her first. So, am I the asshole? This situation involves a mix of both practical and emotional challenges. On one hand, you clearly have a valid need for more kitchen space to prepare your meals and do the things you enjoy, like baking. On the other hand, Helen's illness has clearly made her sensitive to anything that might feel like a slight against her or her need for space. It seems like a classic case of 2 people having valid but conflicting needs and struggling to communicate about them. That said, where you might have gone wrong is not discussing the kitchen cart with Helen first, especially since she has a history of feeling like her needs are being overlooked. While you're not wrong to seek out more space for yourself, She might have felt blindsided or like you were undermining her struggles by introducing a solution without first discussing it. Given the ongoing tension between your needs and hers, talking things out before making a decision that directly impacts both of you could have helped avoid this conflict. I'm 36F. Not sure what to do about my husband, 35M. Context. Been together since we were 16, 17, have an almost 2-year-old son together. My husband, 35M, has always had some degree of anxiety. It's not something that was ever too overwhelming, but he'd get stressed out over things like not getting a promotion or having an incident at work. He has a hard time bouncing back from those situations, but it never really impacted us severely, at least not until we had our son. In the fall of 2023, things took a turn for the worse. He was already struggling with anxiety at work, and then the stress of our new baby added another layer of pressure. His anxiety became more and more debilitating, and eventually, it was like he couldn't function at all. He lost about 20 pounds because he couldn't eat, and he wasn't sleeping. It got to the point where he needed to take medical leave from his job. But even after a couple of months of rest, he wasn't able to go back. And eventually, he lost his job. Fortunately, we had some savings, and our son wasn't in daycare yet. My mother-in-law helped with childcare. Since my husband wasn't able to, financially we were okay, but it was still a huge stress. We were lucky to have support from family and friends during this time. His mom bought us groceries. His best friend, who had also been laid off, spent a lot of time with him, and he eventually got on medication, a very low dose, 15 milligrams, but still a start. Over time, he started to feel better, got a new job, and we got back on our feet. In the meantime, I had a few friends who drifted away, and the stress affected me too, so I also started taking an antidepressant. Things seemed to be improving until about 3 months after he started his new job. He decided to stop taking his medication against my wishes. Shortly after that, he became addicted to ZYN, nicotine pouches, and he started taking them excessively. On top of that, he went on a spending spree, buying random things, spending around $15,000. A few weeks after that, he totaled his car. This set him back even further. Now, we're back in the same place we were a year ago. Last month, we had a power outage that lasted for 3 days, and we were completely unprepared. The house got cold, and we didn't have the supplies we needed. It wasn't a huge deal, we made it through, but it sucked for a bit. He says this power outage is what triggered his current spiral. Ever since then, he's been acting like he did last year, getting anxious over little things, being overly sensitive to light, having small freakouts at work. He asked his boss to take the majority of last week off, and he had a doctor's appointment scheduled for Friday, but he freaked out at the last minute and didn't go. I was furious, so angry. I told him that if he didn't go to his appointment, I would leave him. But, of course, I didn't follow through. I was mad, but I ended up leaving it alone. I've tried everything. Now, he's supposed to go back to work on Monday, but I don't think he's going to be able to. And I'm scared he's going to lose his job again. The problem is, he works as an electrician, and right now the job market is tough. He has racked up so much debt, and our child is in daycare full-time, which costs us $2,000 per month. Plus, we have an expensive car payment. I make just enough money to cover our bills, but we're barely scraping by, and our savings are dwindling. We won't end up on the streets, but it's not exactly an ideal situation. I feel like I have a couple of options. 1. Leave him. I could take our son, find an apartment, and leave. Maybe if he hits rock bottom, he'll realize that he needs to get it together. 2. Stay and support him. I could stay and try to help him through this. Again, maybe if I encourage him to go to therapy, take his meds, exercise, spend time outdoors, all the things he needs to do, he'll be able to get better. The problem is, I've already tried giving him ultimatums. I've told him that if he didn't go to his doctor's appointment, I would leave him, but I didn't follow through. I've tried everything, and nothing seems to work. The truth is, I don't want to get divorced. Logistically, it sounds like a nightmare, and I love my husband, but I'm completely at a loss for what to do. I introduced my new girlfriend to my mom, and my mom had a mental breakdown, throwaway account because my girlfriend knows my Reddit account. I really don't even know where to begin, but I'm hoping that someone can give me some guidance here because I'm completely lost. I'm 18M, and my girlfriend, 19F, have been dating for 6 months now. Things have been going really well, but a few days ago, I introduced her to my mom, and everything went horribly wrong. Now, I'm stuck in this mess and don't even know what to think. Here's the backstory. My mom and dad got divorced almost a year ago. I found out just 2 days after starting university, and honestly, it hit me really hard. I kind of saw it coming, but that didn't make it any easier. My mom immediately moved out and started living with my grandma in another state, so I only saw her once during this whole year. The separation really affected me, and I felt really lonely. For a long time, I wasn't interested in dating anyone, and when my girlfriend asked me out the first time, I turned her down. But she was persistent, and I'm so glad she was because she's really helped me through everything that I've been bottling up. So, last month, I had a Thanksgiving break and decided to visit my mom for a bit. She asked to meet my girlfriend, which I thought was a good idea since it had been 6 months and we were getting pretty serious. I agreed to it, and my girlfriend and I drove up to meet her. We were supposed to meet in the parking lot of a restaurant. My mom was already there when we pulled up, so I got out of the car and gave her a hug. My girlfriend got out of the car behind me, and I started introducing them. But the second I mentioned my girlfriend's name, my mom just froze. She stared at her with a panicked look in her eyes, and then, before I could even ask if she was okay, she just turned and ran back to her car. She didn't say a word, didn't even look at me, just hopped in her car and drove off. I was left standing there, totally confused. My girlfriend was just as confused. We had no idea what had just happened. But that's not even the weirdest part. Later, I tried calling my mom to check in, but she blocked my number. She blocked my email too. I couldn't reach her at all. I called my grandma, and apparently, my mom hasn't even been home since that day. So now I'm in total shock. I'm horrified about what's going on with my mom, and I have no idea how to handle it. The weird part is that I haven't really talked to my girlfriend about any of this. After it happened, I asked her if she knew why my mom reacted like that, but she seemed just as confused as I was. Since then, we haven't really discussed it further, but I feel like there's more to this than just a random panic attack or something. My mom has never had any history of mental health issues, so this is really out of character for her. Plus, there's no reason why my mom should have any connection to my girlfriend at all. My girlfriend and I met in university, and my mom has never mentioned her to me. The strange part is that my mom seemed to recognize her, but my girlfriend doesn't know her, which is seriously baffling. I know I need to talk to my girlfriend about this, but I'm not sure how to approach it. Do I ask her straight out if she's hiding something from me? Do I accuse her of lying about not knowing my mom? Or is there a gentler way to bring this up? I'm terrified of doing anything that might cause more problems between us, but I really need to figure out what's going on here. At this point, I'm so confused and overwhelmed. I just don't know what to do, and I feel like I'm losing both my mom and my girlfriend over something I don't understand. I, 25F, read messages between my boyfriend of 8 years, 24 meters, and his female friend, 28F, context. Today, I, 25F, was using my boyfriend's, 24M, computer, and while I was on it, Facebook was open in one of his tabs. I knew I might be crossing a boundary by opening his conversation with someone, but I did it anyway. This person is a female friend of his, a coworker from over a year ago, with whom he's developed a close friendship. They don't work together anymore, but she still frequently initiates plans to spend time together. At first, I thought this was fine, but over time, I've grown increasingly concerned. She often turns to him for emotional support, dating problems, relationship advice, personal issues, and has always referred to him with affectionate terms like, dear. She invites him to expensive outings, calls him when she's upset, and seems to rely on him a lot emotionally. I initially tried to brush this off, thinking that her background, she's a single mom and an immigrant who's been through an abusive marriage, might explain her emotional dependence on him. But it's been bothering me more recently, especially with some of the comments she makes, like, do you think someone like you would ever want to marry someone like me? What I found. Today, I opened up their conversation and saw a series of messages that really disturbed me. They had spent time together the previous evening, and in her message, she referred to spending time with a young man and mentioned that she thought she could fall in love with him. She also said she needed more of his hugs and was craving his touch. Then she added, "I miss you," to which my boyfriend responded, saying she was sweet and that he missed her too. What makes this especially troubling is that she belongs to a religion where physical contact between unmarried men and women is prohibited. So, even something as simple as a hug between them would be significant in their context. As I was reading the conversation, I noticed that the messages started disappearing, which made it clear that he had deleted them from another device that synced with his computer. I immediately confronted him about this, and he admitted that he had intentionally removed the messages because he knew how it would look. He insisted that the comments about craving a man's touch were meant for someone else, but given the context of their conversation, I can't bring myself to believe him. How I feel. Right now, I feel betrayed, humiliated, and violated. I'm struggling to trust him after everything I've read, and I feel like a serious boundary has been crossed. I also regret not addressing some of her concerning behaviors earlier, thinking that her emotional vulnerability and difficult background justified how close they were. But now I feel disgusted, hurt, and like I'm grieving the trust one once had in him. Where do I go from here? Given everything that has happened, I'm not sure how to proceed. I feel like my trust in him has been completely shattered. I'm wondering whether it would be justifiable to ask him to completely cut off contact with her, or whether I should walk away from the relationship entirely. Should I give him the benefit of the doubt and try to work through this? Or is this a deal breaker for me? Am I the asshole for telling my roommate her cat loves me more than her? Alright, so here's the situation. My roommate, who is 21 years old, texted me late in August to ask if it would be okay with me if she co-parented a kitten with her boyfriend, who lives in another state. Naturally, I said yes because, well, I love cats. Plus, I've always wanted one. A week later, my roommate brought home the kitten, who, by the way, is the cutest little thing I've ever seen, and I immediately fell in love with him. Here's where things get complicated. My roommate already had a cat, an older cat she adopted a couple of years ago, named Grammy. Now, when the kitten, whom I'll call Sushi, came home, Grammy was not thrilled. Understandably, she wasn't ready to share her space with a newcomer. So, my roommate and I decided that it would be best to let Grammy warm up to Sushi at her own pace, and my roommate insisted that Grammy should stay in her room. It's a pretty big room, and Grammy already had her litter box, food, and water in there. Next came the question of where Sushi would sleep. He was so tiny when he first came that I did some research to find out what would be the best sleeping arrangements for him, and everything I read suggested it would be okay to let him sleep in the bathroom for the first few nights. So that's what I did. After those initial nights, we agreed that Sushi could roam freely around the apartment at night. My roommate would keep her door closed, keeping Grammy inside, and I kept my door open in case Sushi got lonely. I even placed his little cat bed on top of my bed for extra comfort. From that point on, it became clear. Sushi slept in my room every night. As time went on, I started to realize I was spending a lot more time with Sushi than my roommate was. She's busier than I am, so when she wasn't around or was busy, Sushi's care fell more on me. I ended up being the one to clean his litter box every day, feed him almost daily, and I was the one who did all the research on how to care for him. If both my roommate and I were going to be out for an extended period, I made sure Sushi had someone to look after him. He even sleeps on my chest every night, and when both of us are sitting in the living room together, Sushi almost always chooses me to cuddle with. Now, to be fair, my roommate has been paying for Sushi's vet bills, litter, and food, but still, I could tell she was getting jealous. At one point, she even said with a sad expression, "He seems to like you more than me." I understood why she felt this way, but at the same time, it wasn't really something I could control, right? Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago. My roommate told me she would be paying rent for the remainder of our lease, but she was planning to move back to our hometown. Naturally, I was upset, but not because she was leaving. What bothered me was the fact that she said she'd be taking Sushi with her. When I expressed how sad that made me, she got upset and reminded me that Sushi was her cat and that I could visit him whenever I wanted. But he was hers. Now here's where I'm torn. All of my friends have said that Sushi seems to love me and probably considers me his primary owner. They said it's clear he's more attached to me than to her. I'm starting to feel like Sushi is more my cat than hers, but I'm also worried that I'm overstepping boundaries. I don't want to make my roommate feel bad, but it feels like Sushi has become a bigger part of my life than hers. So, the real question is, am I the asshole for thinking of Sushi as my cat instead of hers, especially after everything that's happened? My friends are getting married, and I can't find a date. I'm an 18-year-old male who has just finished school. Despite my age, I've never been in a relationship and have never been on a single date. To be honest, I'm not overly upset by this, and I don't feel like I've missed out on something important. When I look back on my younger self, I can clearly see that I wasn't in any way ready for a relationship. Over the past couple of years, while I haven't actively avoided dating, I recognize that the timing just hasn't been right for me. Between personal growth and my academic responsibilities, I don't think I was in the right headspace for a relationship. Admittedly, I might be telling myself this as an excuse, but that's how I see it. One of my close friends, however, has been in a serious relationship for quite some time, and he and his girlfriend are even talking about getting married as soon as next year. I want to make it clear that I am genuinely happy for them. In a world where it seems like people date for a few months only to break up and end up hating each other, it's really refreshing to see a couple who has been together for so long and are considering a future together. I don't feel jealous of them at all. If anything, I admire their relationship. I'm not in a rush, and I know I'll have my own path. I don't want to rush into something that isn't right for me. That said, their relationship got me thinking about my own future. I feel like I'm falling behind. All of my friends have been in relationships, and some are even engaged or married. I'm scared that I'll be left behind, that I'll stay too hesitant, and end up alone forever. It's intimidating to be someone who has never even dated and watch everyone else move forward in their romantic lives. I've always been on the shy side, and when it comes to relationships, I find the whole process quite daunting. The idea of jumping into a relationship just to see where it goes doesn't appeal to me at all. I don't want to date just for the fun of it. I want to make sure that I'm dating someone I can genuinely see myself with for the long term. I'm not saying I expect to know if I want to marry a person before I even start dating them. That would be ridiculous. But I don't see the point in dating someone if I already know I'm not going to be interested in them in the long run. To me, dating is about getting to know a person in a deeper way and figuring out whether there's potential for a meaningful relationship. So, I guess what I'm asking is, how do I even begin dating? It feels kind of embarrassing to admit, but I've never even been on one single date. I'm terrified of messing things up with a girl I like, or making the situation awkward if she's just someone I enjoy being friends with. But at the same time, I know I can't keep waiting for the perfect opportunity to fall into my lap. I have to take risks if I want to find the right person. How do I overcome this fear of rejection without making reckless decisions? How do I balance the desire for a long-term relationship with the reality that nobody is perfect, and if I expect perfection, I might never find anyone? Spent so much time looking from the outside, trying to find a woman who seems to have all the qualities I want in a partner, but I haven't been willing to put myself out there. I'm scared to risk rejection, and I'm scared of looking foolish. Most of all, I'm scared that I'll never meet the right person, or that I'll miss my chance. When I look into the future, I honestly don't know how it will happen. The thought of approaching someone, even just to introduce myself, seems so overwhelming, let alone trying to start a romantic relationship with them. So, here's my question. How do I begin dating from a place of almost no experience? How do I get past the fear that I'll only do more harm than good by trying to pursue a relationship? Should I be ultra picky? Or should I just take the plunge and see where things go? And should I risk opening up to a girl I care about, not just as a potential partner but as a friend, without making things awkward between us? Where do I even start? He does nothing around the house, and it's driving me crazy. I'm a 36-year-old woman, let's call me Sarah, and I split up with my husband, John, also 36, in December 2020. He couldn't afford to move out, so I told him to start saving and leave once he could manage. Well, 2 years later, he's still here. Then last year I got really ill. I have kidney failure, and I need his help with getting the kids to school and taking me to my treatments. I would be okay with him staying if he helped out around the house, but he doesn't. I struggle with cleaning due to my illness, but I do my best. When I go through things like medical procedures or infections, literally no cleaning gets done, and the house becomes a disaster zone. We recently moved, and I've spent around £10,000 buying new things for the house, garden, and kids. John has done a little painting, but he hasn't put the blinds up, assembled the shed, taken things to the tip, or unpacked anything from the move. 5 months ago, I pay most of the bills. He pays £40 for the internet and his car, but I bought him the car and I still have to give him petrol money. He buys some food for the kids, but it's always unhealthy, loads of sugary snacks and fizzy drinks, despite me asking him to feed them healthier options. 2 of our 3 children have started gaining weight. I've also gone into debt to buy all the things for the house, but I'm not worried because I can pay it off over the next 2 years. What really worries me, though, is how much I'm struggling with John's lack of help. He is useless. I wish I had someone who could see when I'm struggling and step in to help. When the house starts falling apart, he does nothing. If I don't clean, nothing gets done. And I have no idea what he does with his money every month. He refuses to tell me where it goes, and I see very little of it. My mental health is getting worse because of this. I feel trapped, and my illness makes it even harder to cope. I've tried talking to him about it several times. I've told him I'll have to kick him out if things don't change. He'll clean for maybe 2 days and then it's back to nothing. He still refuses to be open about his finances. I can't even trust him to cook a meal. He messes it up so badly that I end up doing everything myself anyway. It's starting to feel like he's doing things wrong on purpose to frustrate me. I hate that I'm even considering kicking him out, but why should I put up with it? He contributes nothing, either financially or emotionally, to the household. He's miserable, and while the kids love him, they've learned not to ask him for help because he just gets angry. I feel like I'm losing my mind over this. I'm up all night, ruminating, writing these posts just to get it off my chest. I feel like I'm going crazy. I have no close friends or family to lean on for help, and it feels like I'm constantly the bad guy for wanting something basic. Help around the house and a little support when I'm sick. I'm the one who makes birthdays and Christmas happen, while he does nothing, and it only adds to my stress during those times. I don't even know what I'm asking here, but if anyone has advice, I'd really appreciate it. Should I cancel my out-of-state trip to stay home with my boyfriend? Hi, I'm 21 and my boyfriend is 28. We've been together for almost 3 years, and I'm really torn about what to do for this upcoming holiday season. I'm trying to figure out whether I should cancel my trip to be with my boyfriend or stick to my family plans. I don't want to be an asshole to either side, but I also don't want to leave my soulmate at home for the holidays. Background *: last year, my boyfriend and I managed to visit both sides of our families and had a great time, especially at my mom's side. But the year before, New Year's was a total disaster. My mom convinced us to join her at a meet and greet with neighbors in her new area, and it ended up being miserable. The vibe was all wrong, and it was nothing like how we had imagined ringing in the new year. This year, I was hoping to redeem ourselves, but things are looking complicated again. For context, my boyfriend works at a busy retail store and getting time off for Christmas is always a challenge, but somehow he managed to get the last few days of the holiday season off, which we've been really looking forward to. This past year has been tough for me health-wise, and my boyfriend has been my absolute rock, supporting me emotionally, physically, and financially through a lot of hospital bills and appointments. After all the stress we've been through, I've been hoping for a special holiday together, a chance to reconnect and enjoy each other's company. Now, my dad wants to take my brother and me to visit my grandma for Christmas. I love my grandma and I would really enjoy spending the holiday with her, but I also want to be with my boyfriend. I'm frustrated because I've been asking my dad for the schedule for over a month, and today he finally gave me the details. We'll be at my grandma's house a few days before Christmas and stay a couple of days after, then visiting more family for New Year's. The problem is that my boyfriend and I both agree that he won't be able to get the time off to join me, and since my dad's place is 3 hours away from the nearest airport, it seems unlikely that my boyfriend can meet me there. I'm really feeling stuck because part of me wants to be with my elderly grandma for what might be her last Christmas, and part of me wants to be with my boyfriend. I want him to meet my dad's side of the family too, but it feels like I'm being pulled in two different directions. I also feel terrible about asking my dad for more changes to the plan, especially since he already made arrangements with extended family and I've only just now received the itinerary. To make matters worse, my boyfriend doesn't want to ask for more time off because he doesn't think it's realistic. He's been so supportive all year, and I feel guilty about the idea of leaving him alone for the holidays. He deserves a nice holiday too, and it breaks my heart thinking about him spending Christmas without me, but at the same time, I feel like I'll miss out if I don't go see my family. I've been thinking about canceling my trip and staying home with him, but then I would feel like I'm letting down my family, especially my grandma, who is so excited to see me. The anxiety and overwhelm from this decision are clouding my judgment, and I don't know what's best for me emotionally. I want to make the right choice but don't know what that is. Edit. Wow. Thank you so much to everyone who commented. Your advice really opened my eyes. I realize now that I've been letting my anxiety take over and cloud my judgment. My family is incredibly important to me, and I've hardly seen my extended family in years. I'm the second oldest cousin, and I know they're excited to have me there. After hearing all your perspectives, I've come to the conclusion that going on this trip is the right decision. I love my boyfriend deeply, and I know we'll have many more Christmases together. One more holiday apart won't hurt. Thanks again for all your support. It means so much to me. Thank you all for your hilarious and insightful responses to my post. You really made me laugh with your trauma stories. Grinning face with sweat. So here's the situation. Am I the asshole for not wanting to make an effort for my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, to bond with my kids? My in-laws live in another country and have 4 grandchildren in total. My kids are babies B and C, and my husband's brother has 2 kids, A, who's 2.5 years old, and D, 6 months old. Since A was born, my mother-in-law, Amael, has made a habit of calling my husband every time A is with her. She'll then go on and on about how wonderful A is. I understand that A was her first grandchild and the only child for a long time, so I get that she's excited about A, even though it can be a bit boring to FaceTime with a baby. But now there are 4 grandkids to juggle. It seems very important to my MIL that my husband loves A just as much as he loves B and C, even though she doesn't expect the same from my brother-in-law. Since B and C were born, my husband has tried to reach out to his mom every couple of days, showing her our kids in hopes that she'll say how wonderful they are. But it never happens. Instead, when he calls, she interrupts him and starts talking about A or her job. MIL visited us last month and brought A along so that A could bond with B and C. They stayed for a week, and honestly, it was frustrating. She never once showed interest in how B and C were doing, didn't ask about their lives, and seemed more focused on A. The same thing happened with baby D. MIL asked for pictures of all her grandchildren, even though D was back home with my sister-in-law. She picked up A and held her while B and C were left on the floor. When she left, she called my husband but didn't once mention how happy she was to have seen B and C. Instead, she talked about how adorable A was at the airport. MIL only seems interested in B and C if it benefits A's relationship with them. She doesn't care to see the bond between B, C, and D even though they're only about 6 months apart and could likely bond better as they get older. I could maybe understand if D were too young, but she expected B and C to bond with A when they were less than a month old. She even forgot D was home when she FaceTimed my husband once. She was talking about A, and he asked her where D was. IL was surprised and said, "Oh, that's true. Where is she?" "Oh, she's back there." What really gets me is that MIL can't even tell B, the skinny blonde, and C, the chubby baby with black hair, apart, and she doesn't even know D's eye color. She only has eyes and love for A, and I honestly don't understand why. Maybe it's because A is her firstborn's child, but it's still upsetting. My husband has expressed that it saddens him to see that his mom doesn't show as much interest in D as she does for A. He claims she did the same with him and his brother when they were kids, but he doesn't seem to realize that she does the same with our kids. I don't understand why I should go out of my way to make sure ML bonds with my kids when she doesn't seem to care as much about them. Sure, It's sad for D because she'll likely see that grandma prefers A. But MAL lives in another country, and I'm just not interested in forcing a bond that doesn't seem to exist naturally. What's really bothering me right now is that my husband gets upset with me for not making an effort for my kids to bond with MAL. He also gets mad when I don't seem thrilled about her visits. MAL is planning to visit again in January, and my husband has asked me to invite her to bathe the kids, as though that will somehow strengthen their bond. He even suggested we let her bathe them in the middle of the day, just so she can do it. I asked him why I wouldn't offer the same to my own mom, but he didn't understand why my mom should bathe the kids. He wants me to come up with activities to do with her, but I just don't see why I should make all this effort when she only seems to care about A. My own family is very involved with the kids, and even though we don't see them as much as we would like, we make an effort to stay close. But when MIL comes, I feel like I'm expected to make special arrangements just to make her feel important. I just don't get why I should keep pushing when she shows so little interest in my kids. Thanks for reading, and sorry for the long post. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Am I the asshole for not driving my boyfriend's siblings places? I, 19F, have been dating my boyfriend, 21M, for about 10 months. His family recently moved back to the area from New Jersey, and while things have mostly been smooth, there's a situation involving his younger brother Derek, 17M, and sister 11F, that has caused some tension. Derek and his sister both attend private Catholic schools in the area, and while my boyfriend picks up his sister, Derek is expected to figure out his own rides. My boyfriend asked Derek to handle his own rides during the week, except for Monday and Wednesday when Derek needed transportation to school. Since Derek's school is about 30 minutes from my house, I agreed to help out and drive him for the year at no cost. I didn't mind as it was only 2 days a week, and I wanted to help. However, this week things started to get more complicated. On Sunday, Derek asked if I could take him to a church event on Friday so he could see his girlfriend, whose parents don't allow them to meet outside of school. I agreed since I wasn't already picking him up from school on that day. But then, throughout the week, the situation got out of hand. On Monday and Wednesday, I picked him up from school as planned. But on Tuesday and Thursday, I got calls saying he didn't have a ride. I couldn't give him a ride on Tuesday because I was working, and on Thursday, I told my boyfriend that I couldn't afford the gas for another trip. He offered to pay for the gas, which helped me fill up halfway, so I agreed to drive him on Thursday. Then came Friday, which turned into a nightmare. After a long, much-needed nap, I woke up at 3 p.m. to multiple calls from Derek asking if I could pick him up. I told him he should try his friends or his girlfriend for a ride. As my boyfriend couldn't pick him up because he was working until 7 p.m., Derek insisted that his mom couldn't get him and that I had to be the one to do it. I decided to make the trip. While I was out picking up Derek, my boyfriend was in a fight with his mom, who had an appointment at 4:30 p.m. and didn't inform him in advance. She expected him to pick up his sister at 2:45 p.m., but I was already 20 minutes away from her school. I told my boyfriend that I wasn't going to make another 20-minute trip to pick up his sister unless I was compensated for the gas. He agreed, understanding my position. Finally, I informed Derek that due to everything that had happened during the week, I would not be driving him to the church event unless he paid me for the gas. He seemed upset, but I stood my ground. Now, I'm wondering, was I wrong for refusing to continue driving Derek without being paid for gas? Am I being unreasonable for expecting some sort of compensation for the extra effort? Or is this just part of helping out in a relationship? AITA for not driving my boyfriend's siblings' places? I sent a Frank Sinatra song to my boyfriend, and now he thinks I'm cheating, so I, 20F, sent my boyfriend, 24M, a Frank Sinatra song, and now he's accusing me of cheating. Let me explain how this all started. It's final season, and I've been super stressed with school. I've barely been sleeping, so to keep a positive mood, I put on an older romantic playlist. While I was listening, this one song by Frank Sinatra, Change Partners, played, and I thought it was cute. To me, the song sounded like it was about two people finally finding each other and being the perfect match. So I sent it to him saying, "This is cute." Well, apparently I couldn't have been more wrong. He thinks the song is about cheating, since the lyrics talk about changing partners and how it's better to move on when things aren't working. He now believes I'm cheating on him, and honestly, I don't know what to do. Here's the thing. I'm always with him in terms of communication. He knows my location 24/7 through Life 360 and Apple Maps, and I'm almost always at the library, work, or my dorm. Basically, my routine is pretty predictable. I constantly update him, and I try to call him every chance I get. He's met my friends, and they all love him. I send him funny updates or videos of what they say about him, and I'm constantly talking about him to them so much that they make fun of me for it. It just doesn't add up for me that he'd think I'm cheating. To prove my innocence, I even sent him my call log for the past 6 months, my Snapchat best friends list, which is literally just him, and all my recent messages. But now he's telling me I could have deleted things or hidden my secret people. It's like nothing I do is enough to prove that I'm not cheating. Then, he sends me a list of like 40 guys I follow on Instagram, claiming that I'm hiding something by following these people. The thing is, I have over 1,000 followers and maybe fewer than 50 are men. The guys I follow are mainly past teachers, old coworkers, boyfriends of friends, or people I went to high school or middle school with. Now he's insisting that I unfollow every single one of them. It just feels so unfair and unhealthy for him to demand this, and it really frustrates me. I go to a very demanding school and am in a tough major, so I genuinely don't have the time for another man. I'm literally in the library until 2 a.m. most nights, trying to keep up with assignments. There is no way I could be cheating, but it's like he doesn't trust me no matter what I say or show him. To make matters worse, he wants me to change my Instagram bio and post about him right now, but the way he's demanding it feels wrong. I wouldn't mind doing something sweet for him, but being forced into these drastic measures feels really off to me. I feel like I'm being pushed into something I'm uncomfortable with just to ease his mind, and it's really taking a toll on me. Partner plays games all night until the early hours. How should I approach this? Hi everyone. I, 35F, have been with my partner, 37M, for 3 years, and we have a daughter together. Our relationship has had its ups and downs, but there's been a lot of love and effort. However, I'm starting to feel increasingly alone in the evenings, and I'm not sure how to approach this or if I'm being unreasonable. Lately, my partner has started playing a PC game every evening. He plays with a group of people online in real time, and he does this after our baby goes to bed, usually until the early hours. He often doesn't come to bed until after I've already fallen asleep. While he's great at helping around the house and looking after our daughter, I feel isolated during our downtime together, which is something I really miss. At first, his gaming was just an occasional thing, but it's become more of a routine. Every night, I'm left alone while he's immersed in the game. When he's not gaming, he's talking about it, researching strategies, or planning with his group. Don't get me wrong, I'm really happy he has a hobby he enjoys, and I understand that he loves gaming. I get it, I have 2 brothers who are also avid gamers. But I feel like we're disconnected, and I miss having quality time with him, especially when it comes to winding down together in the evenings. I've tried to be understanding, but the loneliness is starting to affect me. Occasionally, we'll watch a movie, but honestly, it feels more like a duty to him than something he genuinely enjoys with me. We don't go out much because of the baby, limited childcare, and financial reasons, so this lack of together time has been really hard to adjust to. I'm thinking about bringing it up to him and maybe suggesting that we set aside certain nights each week where he doesn't play so we can spend that time together. But I'm not sure what's reasonable or how to approach it without coming across as nagging or unsupportive of his hobby. I'd love some advice or experiences from others who've dealt with this. How can I express how I'm feeling without making him feel like I'm attacking his passion? How many nights a week would be fair for him to not play? And how do I find a balance between supporting his interests and ensuring we have quality time together? Thanks so much for any advice. Hi everyone. I'm looking for some perspective and advice because I'm at a point where I'm exhausted and unsure of what to do with the ongoing tension between my husband and my mother. The situation. I, 33F, have been married to my husband, 36M, for 3 years now. Our relationship is generally great, but there's a major issue. My mother and my husband don't get along at all. It's not that they're openly hostile, but there's a lot of underlying tension that makes family gatherings and certain situations really uncomfortable for me. Here's a little background. My relationship with my mother, it's complicated. She had a very difficult childhood, And while I understand she has her own emotional baggage, she's also quite immature. She doesn't have many personal relationships outside of my brother and me, and she holds grudges. She has a tendency to believe she's always in the right and has a very idealized view of herself. She also expects a lot from others without being very reciprocative, especially when it comes to emotional support. My husband's bluntness. On the other side, my husband is a good guy, but he's very blunt and often speaks in a curt manner. He doesn't mince words, and that has caused some friction with my mom, especially since she tends to be oversensitive. I've tried to adjust to his directness over the years, but it's hard for me to change how my mom reacts to it. What happened? The situation came to a head recently when my brother had surgery and needed support at the hospital. My husband had planned to stay with my brother overnight, but my mom decided she also wanted to stay due to some complications. There was a misunderstanding about the number of people allowed to stay, and my husband, in his usual direct tone, said, "I'm not going to leave tonight," and effectively told my mom to leave. In the morning, when she came back, she spoke to him dismissively, telling him she didn't need his help anymore and that he could leave. I was really hurt by the way she spoke to him because I felt like she was being disrespectful, but I also understand that his tone and bluntness didn't help the situation. My mom then expressed to me that if my husband really wanted to help, he should have been more respectful and considerate toward her. She believes that she and I are a separate unit, and that my husband is only a son-in-law who should be more deferential to her, especially since she is my mother. The bigger issue: this isn't the first time they've had issues. My husband feels unappreciated because, despite helping out when asked, my mother never really acknowledges him, doesn't invite us over, and rarely reaches out to him. On the other hand, my mother thinks he's rude and unhelpful because of his bluntness. He admits his tone can be harsh, but he feels like it's justified because he was trying to keep things under control during a stressful situation. He also feels like if she wants to be respected, she needs to do the same for him. I've always been caught in the middle, trying to mediate and keep the peace, but it's emotionally draining. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells whenever they meet, and it's putting a lot of strain on me. I'm clearly biased because I have a complicated relationship with my mother, but I'm not sure how to handle this anymore. It's been a problem for years, and I'm not sure if it's salvageable. I struggle. I love my husband deeply and want to support him, but I also want to honor my relationship with my mother. I feel like both of them are at an impasse and don't understand each other's perspectives. My husband is done trying to fix things with my mom, while my mom just brushes off any issues, thinking it's not a big deal. I feel stuck between two people I love, and I'm exhausted by it. I'm hoping to get some advice on whether this is something that can be fixed. Is it possible for my husband and mother to get along? Or should I just accept that this relationship is always going to be strained? What should I do moving forward? Can I salvage this situation, and how? Am I the asshole for having friends who make insensitive jokes, despite knowing they don't mean them, and scolding my friends when they do? I'm fresh out of high school and have been dating this girl for about a month now. I really like her. She's kind, creative, thoughtful, and genuinely everything I'm looking for in a partner. She likes me too, but she said she's uncomfortable moving forward in our relationship because of my friends. To be clear, I know my friends aren't perfect. They have pretty typical edgelord humor, especially common in young men of our age, influenced by internet culture. They're not hateful people, and I know they don't mean anything serious when they make jokes about sensitive topics like race or use slurs. They're just ignorant in that way. However, I recognize that this isn't okay, and whenever it happens, I always call it out. I don't condone their behavior, and I try to correct them. The problem is, my girlfriend can't tolerate the jokes at all. She feels strongly about this, and for her, even joking about racism or using slurs is something that's a deal breaker, regardless of whether or not it's meant maliciously. I understand her point of view, and I'm not arguing that it's wrong to feel uncomfortable with that kind of humor, but at the same time, I feel like it's out of my control beyond calling my friends out on it. She's not asking me to drop my friends, but she does feel like she can't justify dating me while I continue to associate with people who make these kinds of jokes. I understand where she's coming from, but it feels like I'm being judged for something I can't change. I love my friends, and some of them have been there for me through thick and thin. My relationships with them are often closer than with even some of my family. So, my question is, am I the asshole for having friends who make insensitive jokes, even though I don't condone it and actively call them out when they do? Is her boundary unreasonable, or is it fair for her to feel this way? Does this really come down to choosing between my friends or the girl I like, or can these things coexist? Am I the asshole for not cooking a second meal for my younger siblings after they refused to eat what I made? I, 16F, have two younger siblings, Mia, 9F, and Max, 7M. Recently, our parents had to leave for a quick meeting in another state. Unfortunately, bad weather trapped them there longer than expected. It's been a few days now, and while they've been checking in frequently, I've had to take over everything at home, managing my schoolwork, chores, and making sure the house doesn't end up in chaos. A few days ago, I decided to cook a proper meal for dinner. I went all out and made spinach and cheese lasagna from scratch. It took me hours to prep, cook, and clean up afterward, but I was really proud of it. It smelled amazing, and I thought it looked like something you'd see in a food magazine. However, when I served it, Mia poked at it as if it was toxic waste, and Max outright said, "This is gross. I want nuggets." Unfortunately, we didn't have any nuggets or anything else to make. I was frustrated but kept my cool and told them, "This is dinner. If you don't want it, that's fine, but I'm not making anything else." They both refused to eat and went back to watching TV. I figured they'd get hungry and eventually eat, but when I checked later, they still hadn't touched it. I pushed a little, but I was exhausted from everything else I had been juggling, and I eventually gave up and focused on my homework. A couple of days later, when my mom called to check in, I mentioned the lasagna incident. She got upset and said something along the lines of, "They have to eat something, and kids don't really like that stuff." I explained to her that I simply didn't have the time or energy to make a second meal when I was already juggling so much. She got even angrier, claiming they hadn't eaten much because they were too picky to eat what I made. I understand they're kids, but I feel like I've already done my part by cooking, cleaning, and making sure they're safe. I didn't sign up to be their personal short-order cook. And just to clarify, because of the weather, ordering food wasn't an option. Am I the asshole for not making them something else when they refused to eat the lasagna? Am I the asshole for not watering my wife's plants? So, here's the situation. I, 42M, have been married to my wife, 41F, for 3 years. She's a great person in many ways, but when it comes to gardening, she's a bit of a disaster. She claims she loves gardening, but honestly, I think it's more about the idea of it than the actual practice. She's not only bad at it, she's downright neglectful. Her plants die from lack of attention, and it's kind of sad. She might be a fan of the aesthetic or the concept of plants, but she's pretty much the Saddam Hussein of the plant world, meaning her plants rarely make it to adulthood. It really doesn't take much effort, maybe 5 to 10 minutes a day, but she won't even do that. I've been pretty patient with this, but it's hard for me to get behind someone saying they love something when they don't even put in minimal effort to care for it. Her position is that it's her thing and it doesn't impact me, so why should I care? But to me, it feels a little psychopathic to claim to love plants while not doing the basic work to keep them alive. We've more or less come to an unspoken compromise. I turn a blind eye to her plant management or lack thereof, and she's free to continue torturing her plants as she pleases, so long as I don't have to participate. This is where things get tricky. Now, my wife is going on a 3-week vacation, and she wants me to water her plants while she's away. Here's the thing. I know it's easy and takes no time at all, but I really don't want to be involved in this ongoing cycle of plant misery. I don't want to contribute to keeping these poor, neglected plants alive just so she can come home and continue her reign of terror on them. It feels like I'd be giving these plants false hope of survival, only for them to be doomed once she returns. She's calling me dramatic, which, okay, I'll admit I am, but I just can't shake the feeling that I'm morally opposed to it. So we decided to ask Reddit and go with whatever the consensus is. ITA for not wanting to water her plants? Edit. Wow, this blew up in a way I didn't expect. Looks like most people think I'm the asshole, or that I never really loved my wife and will die alone, apparently. Fine, I'll water the plants. My wife has read through your responses and is both mortified and amused. She's vowed to try harder with her plants from now on. We're hoping for a cherry tomato miracle. Also, I've learned my lesson about criticizing her online. Turns out people really like her more than me. So, thanks for the eye-opener. Am I the asshole for writing in my will that I don't want to be buried in a religious cemetery, despite my family's protest? I, 26M, have been battling leukemia for some time now, and it's recently metastasized to other organs. It's been a difficult journey, and it's made me reflect a lot on my final wishes. One of the most important decisions I've made is that I want my burial, or lack thereof, to reflect my personal beliefs, which are not religious. My family, however, is religious. They have made it clear that they expect me to be buried in a religious cemetery. I understand that their request comes from a place of tradition and love, but it doesn't align with how I feel about death and what I believe happens afterward. To avoid any conflict after I'm gone, I made sure to include my wishes in my will. I do not want to be buried in a religious cemetery. I've decided to be cremated, and my ashes will be launched into space, which has always been a dream of mine. I've made sure my wishes are legally binding through my executor. When I discussed this with my family, they were deeply saddened and confused. They didn't understand why I wouldn't allow them to bury me in a place that aligns with their faith. My siblings argued that since I don't have any religious beliefs, it shouldn't matter where my body ends up. My mom broke down, saying that she didn't care what happens to my body, burial, cremation, etc., but that she needs a physical location to visit, like a grave site or a spot where my ashes are spread. My wife echoed this sentiment, saying that she won't have anywhere to take our daughter to visit me. I explained that all they need to do is look up to see me, but seeing how hurt they were has really affected me. I've tried to explain that this is the final decision of my life, and that I've compromised on many things in the past to make them happy. This feels like the only way I'll be able to complete my dream of going to space. But now, seeing how much my decision is upsetting them has made me second-guess myself. I'm wondering if I'm making the right choice, especially when it might be too late to change anything. So, AITA for sticking to my personal beliefs and refusing to be buried in a religious cemetery, even though it goes against my family's wishes? Edit. The reason why the location of my remains matters is because of the commemorative ceremonies my family usually performs at specific points after death. My family feels strongly about having a physical location where they can visit me, whether or not it's tied to a religious ceremony. I want to make it clear that I do understand this need, but I feel strongly that my final resting place should reflect my own beliefs. Edit 2. I've also thought about splitting my remains between space and keeping a portion here, e.g., turning it into glass beads, diamonds, etc., but I've realized this wouldn't work for what I want. It wouldn't make sense for half of my remains to stay here and the other half to be sent into space. I'll try to have another discussion with my family, but it seems that neither side is really willing to compromise. Am I the asshole for going on a spontaneous trip with my best friend instead of helping my partner with a family event? I, 28F, have been dating my boyfriend, Jake, 30M, for about 2 years. We live together, and things have been mostly great, but recently we've been feeling a bit of tension. This weekend it really came to a head. I have this best friend, Ella, 29F, who I've known since childhood. We're incredibly close, and we had been planning a road trip to a nearby beach town for months. We both love spontaneous adventures, and we'd been looking forward to it for a while. It might sound silly, but we were genuinely excited for the getaway. The problem started when Jake's mom planned a big family dinner and asked him to help with preparations. This dinner is a pretty big deal in their family. They always make it a huge event, and Jake usually has to do a lot of work. He mentioned the dinner a few days before and asked if I could help out. I told him I already had plans with Ella, and I didn't want to cancel. He was fine with it at first, but as the day approached, he became more upset. Jake kept reminding me how important this dinner was to his family and that I should be there to support him. He asked me to reconsider my trip. I could tell he was frustrated, but I didn't think I should have to cancel on my friend for a family event that I didn't have any part in planning. I told Jake I wasn't going to cancel the trip and that Ella and I had been looking forward to it for months. On the morning of the trip, Jake gave me the silent treatment. I tried to talk to him, but he said he was disappointed in me and that it was selfish to go when I knew how much the dinner meant to him. I still went with Ella, and we had a great time at the beach, but since I got back, Jake has been distant. He's mentioned a few times how it felt like I chose a trip over his family, and how I should have been more understanding. He says I should have prioritized him, especially since it was a family event. I feel torn because I do understand how important family events can be, but I don't think I should have had to cancel my plans with my best friend, especially since I didn't agree to or help plan the dinner. At the same time, I feel guilty because I know Jake is upset, and I want to be supportive of him. So, AITA for going on my trip with Ella instead of helping Jake with his family event? Am I the asshole for refusing my aunt's request for some of my brother's ashes? I, 26F, recently lost my brother, 47M. 2 days after his passing, one of our aunts contacted us with a request for some of his ashes. For context, this aunt, along with her sisters, has been cruel to both my brother and me our entire lives. Their behavior was fueled by their hatred for our mother. They would say hurtful things, exclude us from family gatherings, and make us feel unwelcome. Even our grandmother participated in this behavior. Eventually, my mother had enough and removed me from the situation. However, my brother, being older, chose to maintain a relationship with them, always hoping they would truly love and accept him. Sadly, they only ever showed up in his life when he was at his lowest. My brother was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and that's when the aunts came back into the picture. They offered him temporary help, like a place to stay or some financial support, but only when he was on death's door. Once he got better, they would disappear again, leaving him to fend for himself. Fast forward to now. After my brother's passing, my aunt sent my mother a message that was, on the surface, a condolence text. However, the main purpose of her message quickly became clear. She wanted some of his ashes. Her reasoning? It would make her family feel better about his passing. There was no apology for how she and her sisters treated my brother, my mother, or me over the years. There was no genuine sentiment in the message. It wasn't about supporting us in our grief or offering help. It was entirely about her and her family's feelings. My mother was stunned by the audacity of the request and didn't respond. However, I couldn't stay silent. I sent a message to my aunt, telling her how disrespectful and selfish her request was. I pointed out her complete lack of empathy and told her no. She could not have any of his ashes. I also told her to stop contacting my mother. Now, my aunts are angry, claiming that I'm the bad guy and that they deserve some of his ashes. I disagree. My brother's ashes are something deeply personal and intimate, and their behavior during his life does not warrant such a privilege. So, am I the asshole for refusing my aunt's request for some of my brother's ashes? Should I cancel my out-of-state trip to stay home with my boyfriend? Hi, I'm 21 and my boyfriend is 28. We've been together for almost 3 years, and I'm really torn about what to do for this upcoming holiday season. I'm trying to figure out whether I should cancel my trip to be with my boyfriend or stick to my family plans. I don't want to be an asshole to either side, but I also don't want to leave my soulmate at home for the holidays. Background asterisk: last year, my boyfriend and I managed to visit both sides of our families and had a great time, especially at my mom's side. But the year before, New Year's was a total disaster. My mom convinced us to join her at a meet and greet with neighbors in her new area, and it ended up being miserable. The vibe was all wrong, and it was nothing like how we had imagined ringing in the new year. This year, I was hoping to redeem ourselves, but things are looking complicated again. For context, my boyfriend works at a busy retail store and getting time off for Christmas is always a challenge. But somehow he managed to get the last few days of the holiday season off, which we've been really looking forward to. This past year has been tough for me health-wise, and my boyfriend has been my absolute rock, supporting me emotionally, physically, and financially through a lot of hospital bills and appointments. After all the stress we've been through, I've been hoping for a special holiday together, a chance to reconnect and enjoy each other's company. Now, my dad wants to take my brother and me to visit my grandma for Christmas. I love my grandma and I would really enjoy spending the holiday with her, but I also want to be with my boyfriend. I'm frustrated because I've been asking my dad for the schedule for over a month. And today he finally gave me the details. We'll be at my grandma's house a few days before Christmas and stay a couple of days after, then visiting more family for New Year's. The problem is that my boyfriend and I both agree that he won't be able to get the time off to join me. And since my dad's place is 3 hours away from the nearest airport, it seems unlikely that my boyfriend can meet me there. I'm really feeling stuck because part of me wants to be with my elderly grandma for what might be her last Christmas, and part of me wants to be with my boyfriend. I want him to meet my dad's side of the family too, but it feels like I'm being pulled in two different directions. I also feel terrible about asking my dad for more changes to the plan, especially since he already made arrangements with extended family and I've only just now received the itinerary. To make matters worse, my boyfriend doesn't want to ask for more time off because he doesn't think it's realistic. He's been so supportive all year, and I feel guilty about the idea of leaving him alone for the holidays. He deserves a nice holiday too, and it breaks my heart thinking about him spending Christmas without me, but at the same time, I feel like I'll miss out if I don't go see my family. I've been thinking about canceling my trip and staying home with him, but then I would feel like I'm letting down my family, especially my grandma, who is so excited to see me. The anxiety and overwhelm from this decision are clouding my judgment, and I don't know what's best for me emotionally. I want to make the right choice but don't know what that is. Edit. Wow. Thank you so much to everyone who commented. Your advice really opened my eyes. I realize now that I've been letting my anxiety take over and cloud my judgment. My family is incredibly important to me, and I've hardly seen my extended family in years. I'm the second oldest cousin, and I know they're excited to have me there. After hearing all your perspectives, I've come to the conclusion that going on this trip is the right decision. I love my boyfriend deeply, and I know we'll have many more Christmases together. One more holiday apart won't hurt. Thanks again for all your support. It means so much to me. Asterisk asterisk, am I the asshole for expecting my husband to know what I like to eat after 20 plus years of marriage? Asterisk asterisk, I'm beyond frustrated right now, and if I had the energy, I would probably scream. I really need some outside perspective here. So please let me know your thoughts or how your relationship works. Thanks in advance. So, here's the situation. My husband, 57, and I have been married for over 20 years. A significant portion of our marriage has been spent apart due to his military service, and even now, after his retirement, he continues working for the military, but in a civilian capacity. We've faced our share of issues over the years, but right now, it's one specific thing that's really bothering me, and I'm at my wit's end. Today, my husband went out to run errands and asked me if I wanted anything for lunch. I told him very calmly, which is important, that I wanted 2 grilled chicken tenders from the place we often eat. I've learned over the years that I need to be incredibly specific when ordering food, because for some reason, after 2 decades of marriage, my husband still seems to have no idea what I like to eat. I could walk into any restaurant, order him a meal exactly how he likes it, even down to customizations like extra sauce, no onions, whatever, and he'd be thrilled. But for me, I have to spell things out in exact detail. I made my request very clear, asking for grilled chicken tenders, and he even agreed. So I thought everything was fine. But then he comes home with breaded, fried chicken tenders. Now, I can't even begin to describe how much I hate breaded chicken tenders. I'm sure I made a face when I saw it, and of course, he immediately got upset. He raised his voice, asking, "What now?" I didn't want to make a scene, so I tried to brush it off, saying, "It's fine, no problem." And I was planning to eat what I could, but he kept pushing, getting louder and louder, asking, "What's wrong this time?" I calmly explained, "I just asked for grilled chicken, but it's okay. I'll eat this." And then, of course, he starts saying, "I never told you that." He grabbed his phone to show me the message, thinking he was right, but as soon as he saw it, he got even angrier. He threw the lunch on the counter and yelled, "Fine. I'll go get you some damn grilled chicken." I tried to calm him down, but that's when I made my mistake. I asked him if we could talk about something that had been on my mind for a while, and I asked him to not get upset or offended. I wanted to have an honest conversation about how, after 20 plus years of marriage, I know everything about his preferences, down to how much cream and sugar he likes in his coffee, but it feels like he doesn't know anything about mine. I didn't phrase it this way, but this is the gist of it. He immediately became defensive, saying, "I thought you just wanted chicken tenders?" So I very softly replied, "Honey, have you ever seen me eat breaded chicken tenders? Even once in the last 20 years? And that was the tipping point. He exploded. He stood up and started screaming at me, calling me FNG smart, and accusing me of thinking I know everything. Then, he went off on me about how I've changed since becoming disabled. I have severe lung issues, and I'm on oxygen 24/7. I also have a bunch of other health problems that came on suddenly. He shouted that I just sit around all day and complain, saying that I think I know everything about everything. Now, let me clarify something. I would give anything to be healthy again. I hate this body. I hate that I can't even walk to the bathroom without gasping for air or take our dogs to the park without my legs going numb from my back problems. Before all this happened, I was very active, working long hours and taking care of 6 kids, his, mine, and ours, while he was often deployed or working elsewhere. I'm the oldest of 6 siblings and grew up being the caretaker. I never expected to end up like this, completely dependent on others, struggling just to do the basics. I've tried to avoid being a burden, but it feels like no matter what I say or ask for, it irritates him. If I ask for a napkin during dinner, he seems exasperated. If I try to do something for myself, I get yelled at. I don't know what to do anymore. Back to today. After he screamed at me, he threw his lunch across the kitchen into the sink, a regular move of his when he's mad at someone during mealtime, and then stormed out of the house. He slammed the door and left in his car. He came back a while later and just ignored me for the rest of the night. He made himself something to eat for dinner, but I had to wait for our daughter, 20, to get home from work so I could ask her to please make me something to eat. I know my husband is under a lot of stress right now, work issues, money problems, taking care of me, and I get that, but I don't think it was unreasonable for me to want an honest conversation about how I feel. I don't think I was acting like a know-it-all. I just wanted to understand why, after all these years, he still doesn't know the basics about me, especially when I know so much about him. So, I'm asking you, does your significant other know what you like to eat? Do you know their order by heart? Does it even matter? Thanks for reading, and I really appreciate any thoughts you have on this. Am I the asshole for refusing to cook gluten-free meals or take my almost adult son out to eat? My 17-year-old son was recently diagnosed with a wheat allergy after struggling with digestive issues for several months. After numerous tests and visits to the doctor, we finally pinpointed that wheat was the cause of his discomfort. As soon as we got the diagnosis, I went into full research mode. I learned everything I could about wheat, its many different names, and how to read food labels to avoid it. I spent hundreds of dollars buying specialized gluten-free foods, snacks, and ingredients for him to try. I even took him to health food stores like Whole Foods and spent even more money buying organic and gluten-free products. I also went the extra mile, purchasing alternative flours and learning to cook gluten-free meals at home. However, despite all these efforts, he still struggled with digestive problems. After another doctor's visit, we confirmed that wheat was the only issue. The problem is, he's been sneaking wheat-based foods into his diet. He's been spending his school paycheck on biscuits and gluten-filled snacks. He also goes to his friends' houses and eats McDonald's or whatever other junk they have, which he knows is full of wheat. The doctor and I have repeatedly warned him that his allergy could get worse over time. It's currently mild to moderate, but if he keeps ignoring it, it could escalate. Just last weekend, he had an allergic reaction and broke out in hives after eating cake and pizza at a friend's place. He's 17, not 10, so I can't be there to monitor everything he eats. He knows full well what he should be avoiding because we've gone over it together. He's even learned to read labels with me. His school has been less than helpful as well. They told me that they won't restrict him from eating certain foods, even with a doctor's note, because he's old enough to make his own choices. They offer gluten-free alternatives, but he refuses to eat them, claiming they taste bad. He's just stubborn about it. A few nights ago, we went out to a gluten-friendly restaurant. I made sure to order a gluten-free meal for him, which cost me $26. Our usual meals average $15 to $18. I checked with him beforehand to make sure the meal was something he would be okay with. When the meal arrived, he didn't eat it. Instead, he secretly grabbed food off of other people's plates and even snuck some bread. My mother-in-law, who always enables him, convinced me that a few bites wouldn't hurt. But it did hurt. On the way home, the car smelled terrible because of the wheat he had eaten. When I confronted him, he tried to deny it, but the smell didn't lie. Now he's complaining of stomach pain and wants to stay home, but I'm frustrated because this pain is self-inflicted. I've been doing my best to accommodate him, spending time, energy, and money to cook gluten-free meals that I don't even always feel taste great myself. I've been begging him to stick to the diet for months, but it seems like none of my efforts matter if he's just going to eat whatever he wants anyway. I'm at my wit's end. I'm tired of spending money we don't really have on gluten-free alternatives that he refuses to eat, only for him to ignore the diet and cause his own discomfort. I feel like I'm wasting my time and resources. I'm torn because I don't want to seem uncaring, but at the same time, I'm getting really frustrated. Am I the asshole for refusing to cook gluten-free or take him out to eat anymore if he's just going to ignore the diet? Am I the asshole for worrying about my sister? I, 22F, have a sister, 31F, who's engaged to a guy she's known for less than a year. They briefly broke up after she found out he had a troubled past. He once planned to join a terrorist group when he was a teen, which got him a long sentence. Despite this, she decided to get back with him, though she hasn't told our parents about this part of his history. I'm not so concerned with his past because he seems to have turned his life around, but there are other things that worry me. My biggest concern is that my sister is rushing into this relationship and moving across the country for a guy she's barely spent time with. They've met in person for a total of 10 days, 5 of which were for their engagement, and he doesn't have a stable job. He's bought a ring and a house, promising to pay off the mortgage, but he's struggling financially. Additionally, he didn't do anything for their engagement reception, showed up unprepared, and had to be driven to the mall to buy a suit. What really bothers me is his attitude. He's homophobic, thinks voting is stupid, and even joked about joining a terrorist group again if he wasn't so scared of getting locked up. I've tried talking to my sister, telling her she's rushing into things, and that this guy needs to get his life together before marriage. But she insists we're just trying to stop her from being happy, and that she's an adult and can make her own choices. After I confronted her, she broke down and said I was not letting her make her own decisions. I got my other siblings involved, and now I'm wondering if I went too far. So, am I the asshole for worrying about my sister and trying to intervene in her engagement? Did I overstep by involving my siblings and confronting her about this guy? I'm looking for some advice because I'm feeling a bit torn and unsure about a situation. I have 4 kids from a previous relationship, and they spend every other weekend with their dad from Saturday morning until Sunday evening. During school holidays, they might stay with him for longer stretches depending on his work schedule and any vacations he's planned. I've always tried to make sure that they have a good relationship with their dad, and I try not to interfere too much with his time with them. Right now, I'm currently 27 weeks pregnant with my 5th child, who will be my first with my current partner. We've been together for a year and a half, and things are going really well between us. He's incredibly supportive, and we've already started thinking about our future together. When we first got together, my partner asked me if I would be interested in going on a holiday with him, and I said yes, but with the condition that I would need to save up for it. Given that I have 4 kids and not a lot of extra money, I didn't feel comfortable with him offering to pay for everything. It was still early in our relationship, and while I'm very fond of him, I didn't feel right having him cover the costs of a holiday for both of us. He understood my hesitation, and we agreed that I would save up over a few months, and then we would go away once I had the funds. We had planned to go on this trip sometime after I had saved enough. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until I unexpectedly became pregnant with our baby. It was a bit of a surprise because I was on birth control at the time, but we're both really excited about the baby, as it will be his first child. However, because of how sick I've been during this pregnancy, it's been difficult for me to even think about traveling. I've been too ill to consider going on holiday, and I don't think it's realistic for me to go before the baby is born. But my partner recently brought up the idea of going on holiday after the baby arrives. He suggested that we go on a trip together, just the 2 of us and the baby, while my other kids are with their dad. I can tell that he's really looking forward to the idea of having some time away with just the new baby and the two of us. It's clear he sees this as an opportunity for us to bond as a new family and have some special time together. But here's where I'm struggling. I feel incredibly guilty about the idea of leaving my 4 kids behind while I go on this trip. To me, it feels like we would be presenting ourselves as a family of 3, my partner, the new baby, and me, and my other kids would be left out. I know that we're starting a new chapter with this baby, but I just don't want my older kids to feel like they're being pushed aside or excluded. They're already used to the idea of me having a new partner, but I don't want them to think that they don't matter because the baby has arrived. It feels wrong to me, even though I know my partner would never intentionally make them feel that way. I've already talked to my partner about how I feel, and he completely understands where I'm coming from. He reassured me that he doesn't want to push my other kids out of our lives, and he truly adores them. In fact, he does more with them than their own dad does, which has been a huge blessing. But he's also expressed how much he was looking forward to having some time just for the two of us. With the baby coming, he's aware that things are going to change, and he thought this holiday would be a good way to enjoy some time together before everything gets more complicated. Even though I know he has good intentions and doesn't mean to make anyone feel left out, I still can't shake the feeling of guilt. Part of me worries that if I go on this trip with just the baby, it will send the wrong message. I also feel bad because I know that once the baby is born, things will be more chaotic, and it might be harder to plan any time away as a couple in the future. So I understand why he's hoping to take this opportunity to go on holiday while we have the chance. But I just can't help feeling awful about not taking my other children along. At the end of the day, I want to make sure my kids feel loved and valued, no matter how many children I have or what the future looks like. I don't want them to feel like they're being replaced or overshadowed by the new baby, and I really don't know if going on a trip with just the baby is a good idea. What do you think? Is it wrong of me to feel this way, or am I just overthinking it? I want to do what's best for all of my children and my relationship, but I don't want to hurt anyone in the process. Am I the asshole for despising my housemates? I'm a second-year university student, and I'm living in halls again. In my first year, I lived with 4 other people, mixed gender, and became really close with 2 of them. However, due to some financial struggles in my family, I had to move back into halls this year because I couldn't afford to rent privately. This time, I'm living with 11 girls in a single-sex house. Some are my age and others are younger. At first, I tried to be civil and respectful, inviting everyone to freshers events and nights out, but quickly realized that they're just not my kind of people. I get that not everyone is going to like me, but I didn't expect things to get as bad as they have. I will say that there are a few decent people here. The girl next door is really kind, and I have no issues with her. But for the others, I just can't handle the privilege and clique culture that's developed in the last 3 months. Now, I know people often complain about cleanliness in shared living spaces, but I actually lucked out in that department. Most people clean up after themselves. The issue, however, is that the cleaning becomes overly extreme at times. For example, one of my housemates washed all the dishes in the first week, which was super kind, but then it became an expectation. I'm the type of person who cooks, washes my plates, and takes them back to my room to clean later. I might spend 10 to 20 minutes in the kitchen a day, but I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that everyone should clean up after themselves. I'm happy to help with communal chores like taking out the trash or sweeping the floor, but we're all adults here, right? The next things that began to irritate me were even worse. It went from petty issues to situations where my housemates just ignored me or refused to help. For example, once I had to pull out moldy popcorn and raw chicken from the bin because they refused to buy the correct size trash bags, and then they rolled their eyes when I asked for help. I've also had to deal with awkward moments like walking into the communal kitchen, only to see my housemates go silent and start texting each other or giggling behind my back. One of my housemates also kept me up until early morning because she called an ambulance for a seizure, which was later confirmed by paramedics to be just a panic attack. While I understand she needed help, she has a history of making everything into a huge drama for attention, which has made me feel increasingly frustrated. But the worst thing that happened recently has to do with my partner. He visits every week, something we've discussed and agreed on with the housemates. Sometimes we have some intimate moments together, and there's usually no problem. Until yesterday, when we heard giggling and shuffling outside my bedroom door, followed by a message from one of my housemates saying that it made them uncomfortable and that I should be respectful. Now, I get that it could be uncomfortable for others, and I apologize to my neighbor just in case it made her feel awkward, but I can't help but feel it's a little over the top. They were literally standing outside my door giggling, and yet, I'm the one being told I was disrespectful? The whole thing was so mortifying, and I now feel guilty and awkward even though it's clear that the other housemates are the ones who were intruding. All these incidents, plus small comments and other little things that keep adding up, have made living here unbearable. I'll admit that my own personal issues, like feeling lonely and isolated, might be making everything feel worse, but I just can't shake the feeling that I despise living with these people. Last year, I had such a positive experience living with my housemates, but this year has been completely different. So, am I the asshole for despising my housemates? I feel like I'm the only one who's trying to make things work, but it's becoming harder and harder to be around them. My life story. It's my first time sharing this with anyone. I belong in an upper-class Pakistani family and both my parents' side are rich. My mother lived with her family in Middle East since birth while my dad lived in subcontinent, and because of this other person who knew both family. My mom ended up coming back to her home country and married my dad. After 1 year of marriage, I was born, and with my birth I brought hardship for my mother. My dad's mom started to treat my mom badly, and it didn't end it here. Even my dad's other siblings started to misbehave and treat my mom badly, and my mom handled all that. My grandpa from dad's side was the only one who wasn't doing all that, while my dad had blind eyes due to my grandma. This continued and got worse day by day, and 4 years later my sis was born, and after a year my dad had a massive lose, resulting in our life getting financially challenged. It got worse to the point that my dad had to close his door and make his bedroom a kitchen and cut my mom from family, which was good. Seeing all this, my grandpa decided to make first floor of our house, and he did, and gave it to my parents to stay, and after a few months my dad was diagnosed with last stage lower abdomen cancer, which he will pass with in few years, leaving behind his children and a witch wife, which got LOTTT worse after my grandpa passed away. We had a private tutor who used to give extra classes after school, so we used to go downstairs to my grandma's house for that. One day in a cold winter we went downstairs as routine, and I opened the door to see my dad's brother, her wife, and my grandma standing. They accused me and my sis, I was 12 and my sis was 8, of destroying their old sofas and plastic plants. My sis heard it and ran back crying while I stood to defend myself and my sis. They didn't listen and kicked me out. I told my mom, and she provided us chairs to sit in our open garage and study for our upcoming final exams, while my witch grandma stared at us through her bedroom window. After this, me and my sis stopped going to my grandma's house, and we were locked jailed in our first floor house. My dad's brothers got married and had children, and they were given special treatment, while me and my sis were literally kicked out. WTF is wrong with her, and God's curse be upon her. She continued to play innocent card. Her torture continued with my dad's brothers until one day I saw scratches on my car. Now I am a very passionate car guy, and I really love my car, and seeing scratches just boiled my blood, but I used to ignore it, but day by day it got worse. There were more scratches and I started to get more angry. I told my dad, and he talked to his brothers about it, but they ignored. Those MFs ignored it like it's nothing, and it continued for about 6 months, which resulted in my car filled with scratches. On day I went downstairs. We had same garage, so me and my dad were going to get breakfast, but I went downstairs early. I went with soft foot as I had a feeling something wrong is happening. And oh boy, I was right. I saw my cousin scratching my car, and it made me furious. That piece of shit ran back to my grandma's room while I started yelling, and I called my dad's brother out loud to come out, but those garbage didn't. I was so angry, and my dad tried to calm me down, but it failed. As we came back and we opened our gate, I saw my cousin playing cricket with my dad's brother, while her wife is eating an apple like nothing happened. I let my dad in, and he went a bit further from me, and then I slammed that metal gate with all my power, which created this loud bang, causing my dad's brother to stop and stare at me while his son stood in a corner and his wife holding her ears. He looked at me as I was wrong, but I looked back at him for 2 minutes straight. I was furious. I didn't said anything and walked away while continue staring at him. Since then I decided to fight now. So I started scratching their car and then they stopped scratching my car. Fought back in every way possible, leaving no chance, and after getting to an extreme length, they decided to sell the downstairs portion to us, which we bought. Things felt different. I thought life would start a new beginning and a new chapter of life will finally start with a positivity. Ik what sin I did, but I was wrong. My dad's family left, but my dad was still here. And my dad broke me like no one else did. The person whom you see as your shelter becomes your enemy. Willie, I fought for him against his brothers. When his brothers used to misbehave, I used to vandalize their downstairs door. But that person who is sadly my fucking father will backstab me. Part 2 soon, and thanks for reading my story.
Actualización 1. Algunos me sugirieron que hablara con mis sobrinos, así que lo hice. Ellos me informaron que ya habían oído hablar de la situación por algunos familiares y habían considerado hablar conmigo, pero no habían tenido tiempo. Después de que los llamé y hablé con ellos, me dijeron que pensaban que hice lo correcto. Mi sobrino fue muy claro en su opinión, diciendo que nunca consideró a su madre como una figura maternal en su vida. Siempre me culpó a mí porque ella nunca estuvo allí para él, y mi sobrina estuvo de acuerdo. Él siempre ha sido el más expresivo del grupo, por lo que era predecible que todo esto viniera de él. Mis sobrinas estaban demasiado emocionales para hablar, pero él estaba muy enojado y molesto. Explicó que Diana solo me hablaba porque nunca hizo lo mínimo por ellos, a pesar de que recibía la manutención infantil de su padre, y aún así los humillaba y les hacía sentir mal solo por existir, lo cual no era culpa de ellos. Ellos creen que hice lo correcto y me han dicho que no van a contactar a su madre, pase lo que pase. También creen que debo defenderme y explicar mi versión de los hechos en las redes sociales, ahora que Diana ha decidido hablar negativamente de mí allí. Piensan que esta es la forma más efectiva de transmitir el mensaje, y por eso lo haré. Estoy encantada de que hayan decidido tomar mi lado en esto, porque mis padres se están manteniendo al margen y han dicho que no quieren involucrarse. Diana nunca les habló después de que sus hijos la rechazaran, lo que me parece raro. La postura educada de mis padres me resulta extraña, dado que no han tenido contacto con Diana en los últimos 6 años. Me decepcionó, pero al menos mis sobrinos me apoyan ahora. Mucha gente me ha preguntado por qué no pedí la custodia y quité a los niños de Diana si sabía que era una mala madre y los estaba maltratando. Mencioné en mi publicación que, aunque sus acciones eran incorrectas, no constituían tortura, abuso o negligencia. Siempre fue dura con ellos y no estaba emocionalmente presente, así que aunque podría haber solicitado la custodia, era muy improbable que los tribunales me dieran la custodia total. Los tribunales generalmente fomentan que las familias permanezcan unidas, y en este caso, ya. Habían perdido a su padre, quien los había abandonado, dejando solo a su madre como progenitora biológica. Naturalmente, el tribunal habría querido que la familia permaneciera junta. Sabía que si presentaba una petición contra ella o tomaba medidas legales, Diana haría todo lo posible para que nunca los volviera a ver. Se aseguraría de que los niños se alejaran de mí. Ya era improbable que pudiera obtener la custodia total, así que eso los pondría en una situación peligrosa. Por eso decidí tomar el camino seguro, mantenerme en contacto con ellos y estar disponible en todo momento. No estoy segura de si fue lo correcto a largo plazo, pero en ese momento me pareció que era la única opción. Tal vez había otras formas de manejarlo, pero fue lo único que se me ocurrió, así que hice lo que creí que era lo correcto. Fue difícil para mí, y durante años debatí si debía solicitar la custodia o quitarles a los niños y reubicarlos, pero no se sabe qué podría haber pasado, así que pensé que era mejor que los niños permanecieran con su madre y mantuvieran el contacto conmigo y mis padres, en lugar de arriesgarse a algo en esa situación. Espero que esto aclare las preguntas que la mayoría de la gente tenía para mí. Tal vez me presenté como la villana por lo que hice, pero no me importa. Sé que los niños están bien en sus vidas y que hice todo lo que pude para mantenerlos felices y a salvo. Siempre estuve ahí para ellos, así que no me siento culpable por nada. Actualización 2. Han pasado una semana desde el mensaje de Diana, y hoy he recibido muchas llamadas telefónicas de familiares y personas que han hablado con ella. Me estaban señalando mis errores y regañándome. Ya estaba realmente cansada, y además tenía mucho trabajo, por lo que no pude publicar antes. Pero hoy decidí que ya era suficiente. Después de una breve conversación con mis sobrinos, finalmente decidí hacer una publicación compartiendo mi versión de los hechos, y de alguna manera, también la de ellos. No creo que nadie en la familia se diera cuenta de todo lo que esos niños pasaron durante su infancia, cuántos insultos tuvieron que soportar cada día solo porque Diana decidió quedarse embarazada siendo joven y dejarlo todo por su novio de ese entonces. Incluso después de todo eso, ella siguió culpando a los demás por sus propios errores y trató de hacer ver que estaba haciendo todo lo posible por lo mejor para sus hijos, cuando en realidad nunca estuvo presente para ellos. Ella decía que yo les había robado a sus hijos y ahora les estaba robando una fortuna, ahora que ellos estaban económicamente bien. Sentí que la gente merecía saber la verdad, no. Solo su versión retorcida de los hechos, en la que ella se presentaba como la víctima, cuando en realidad fue ella quien atormentó a todos. Ya me habían juzgado por varias razones, solo porque conocían su versión, y simpatizaban con ella, pero en realidad, yo merecía compartir mi parte de la historia, al igual que sus hijos. Así que escribí todo hace unas horas y publiqué la publicación. Hasta ahora no ha dicho nada, y los únicos mensajes que he recibido son de algunos familiares que antes me estaban juzgando. Ahora, de manera abrupta, están intentando disculparse por haberme juzgado tan rápido, pero sinceramente, no me importa. Simplemente quería que supieran la verdad. No me importa lo que piensen de mí, pero era fundamental hablar con la verdad y contar cómo Diana trató a sus hijos, por eso ya no tienen contacto con ella. Ahora que todo está dicho y hecho, estoy lista para seguir adelante con esto. Honestamente, no quiero saber nada de Diana, y estuve perfectamente contenta durante los últimos 6 años cuando ella no me contactó. Creo que los hijos de Diana también pueden decir lo mismo. No entiendo por qué sintió la necesidad de crear tanto drama. Si quería dinero, podría haberlo pedido, en lugar de pretender que quería una segunda oportunidad de ser madre.
Update 1. Thank you all for your comments. I've read each one, and I'd like to clarify a few things. First of all, Claire is responsible for the cancellation of my baby shower. Mom and she have always been very close, so I'm sure it was my sister who first came up with the idea. Also, the day my baby shower was canceled, Claire sent me a message telling me not to be so sensitive about my event and that I shouldn't be so hard on Mom. She went on to say that she didn't want Mom to have to answer questions about her divorce all day and that my family should understand that. She also asked me to keep her affair with her boss a secret. Secondly, Mom tried calling me several times afterward, continuing to try to convince me and justify her actions. But this time Matt wanted to talk to her. He started the conversation by telling her what he thought and making it clear how ridiculous it was for her to cancel my baby shower without my knowledge. He firmly stated that he would never allow her to meet our child if she continued to disrespect me so blatantly. My mom was surprised by this, but after what she did, I can't help but agree with my husband's decision. Lastly, my dad is not speaking to either my mom or my sister since he found out about what happened after they canceled my baby shower. Since then, he and my mom have argued and decided to organize a new one, where neither my mom nor my sister will be invited. I've also spoken to all my cousins, who reached out to check on me after receiving my mom's message about the canceled shower. Everyone agrees that my mom crossed the line, and they want nothing to do with her. Additionally, I've received messages from people asking why I never told my dad about how my maternal grandparents were influencing Claire's negative opinions about me. Honestly, I trusted that my mom would address the issue with Claire, as I didn't want to create unnecessary conflict in the family. Sometimes, as children, we find ourselves in situations where we have to stay silent, even when it's uncomfortable. As a child, I expected my mother to stand up for me and defend me against her parents, but unfortunately, that never happened. Clearly, she preferred her own daughter over her adopted one. As I mentioned, my trust and my world were deeply affected by my childhood experiences. Update 4. This update comes after I've given birth, and it's a girl who, by the way, was born healthy, so I'm very happy. Matt has been my rock throughout all this, especially with everything going on with the family, or what's left of it. I'm not sure where to start, but I'll try to explain everything as clearly as possible so you understand what's happened over the past few months. The last I mentioned was how my dad was angry with my sister and mom for their favoritism over the years. Well, now my parents are divorcing, or rather, it's my dad who made the decision. My mom is still fighting to prevent it from happening. This all started a couple of months ago, shortly after my dad kicked Claire out of the house. One day, Claire came back to talk to my dad because she was running out of places to stay in the city, and she wanted to convince him to take her in again. My dad refused again, saying he couldn't keep spoiling a spoiled child like her. What a good father should have done was raise her better, and that's when Claire dropped the bomb. She said that, in any case, he wasn't really her father. She regretted saying it as soon as it came out, but my dad pushed her to explain what she meant. She quickly left the house, and my dad began calling her and leaving hundreds of messages, wanting an explanation. When my mom came home from shopping and saw the look of fear on her face, she knew exactly what was going on. So, she packed her things and came to live with us for a while. Luckily, we have a big house, so there was space for my dad. Eventually, everything came to light with a paternity test, and my dad painfully found out that Claire wasn't his daughter. My mom had suspected this and had told Claire because they were so close. Apparently, my mom had an affair with someone, and that resulted in her pregnancy. The chances of my dad being the biological father were very slim because they'd been trying for so long, but my mom, finally seeing that she was going to have a baby, decided to hide it. She tried to convince my dad that they should go to couples therapy and that the mistake could easily be fixed, but my dad completely refused and asked for a divorce a few days later. Since then, the families have split. My mom's side and my dad's side. It's not hard to know which side I'm on. I haven't spoken to Claire or my mom because they're both blocked. However, I've exchanged a few words with my mom when she showed up at the house to talk to my dad, but it was more like requests for her to leave. Anyway, my dad has now found his own place, and he's requesting not to pay anything in the divorce, since we live in a state where infidelity plays a major role in divorce proceedings. On the other hand, I know Claire has moved in with my mom, so this has worked out quite well for her because she got what she wanted. She hasn't even bothered to contact my dad to see how he's doing or anything. All of this just proves that she's really only thinking about herself. Am I the asshole for telling my brother that his friend's parents threw away his college acceptance letter? Okay, so this happened today. For some background, my parents have been friends with Matt and Amy for many years. They have a son named Steven, who's 18, and he and my brother, also 18, are best friends. Today, my mom called me, I'm 20, and asked if it would be wrong to throw away a college acceptance letter for my brother, who had been accepted to a school far away, because she didn't want him to go. She would literally never do something like that, so I thought she was just being weird or funny, trying to tell me that my brother got into an out-of-state school. But then she got serious and asked me if it would be wrong, and I immediately, because I knew she would never do that, asked her who she knew that actually did that. She reluctantly told me that Matt and Amy had thrown away Steven's college acceptance letter for a school he really wanted to go to, just because they thought it was too far away. The thing is, the college isn't even out of state, it's only about a 4-hour drive away. I told my mom I was really disappointed that they were the type of people who would do that, and she said she had already told Amy off for it. Now, my mom didn't want me to tell anyone. She was just venting to me. She said if I told Steven, Amy would know that she was the one who told me. I agreed not to tell anyone, but I ended up calling my brother anyway and told him what happened. He was absolutely gutted for his friend. He said he'd encourage his entire group of friends to check the online statuses of any colleges they applied to, just in case acceptance letters got lost like Steven's did. That way, my mom wouldn't have to be in the middle of it. I thought that was a pretty good plan, but when I mentioned it to a college friend of mine, she thought I should stay out of other people's business. She said I was an asshole for meddling. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for telling my brother that his friend's parents threw away his college acceptance letter? Edit asterisk since I've gotten so many comments asking about it. I'm not sure if Steven received an email first before the letter came in the mail. I don't talk to him much. What I do know is that a lot of my friends received physical letters when they were accepted. That's why checking online was part of the plan. Am I the asshole for refusing to let my boyfriend's brother stay with us after we get married? I, 24F, and my boyfriend, 25M, have been together for 4 years, and we're planning to get married in 2 to 3 years. His family lives overseas, and he's been independent since he was young. Recently, we've been discussing future plans, and he expressed his desire for his 15-year-old brother to move here in a couple of years, finish high school, and attend college while living with us. Currently, We live separately and have decided not to move in together until we're married. While our relationship has generally been respectful and communicative, the past year has been rocky, mainly because of family-related issues. Here's where my concern lies. If we get married in 2 to 3 years and his brother comes to live with us at the same time, our married life would start with 3 people under one roof. I told my boyfriend that if his brother moves in while he's finishing high school and is still a minor, I'd be okay with him staying with us. While it would make me a little uncomfortable to start married life like this, I understand that a teenager cannot live on their own. However, my boyfriend insists that his brother live with us not only through high school but also throughout his entire college years. This means his brother would be living with us well into adulthood, potentially for another 7 to 8 years. I'm not comfortable with that context. I've spent time with his family to get to know them. His brother looks up to him, loves him, and respects him deeply. He would do almost anything my boyfriend tells him to. However, his attitude toward me is completely different. He's often disrespectful, calls me names under the guise of joking, and treats me like I'm unimportant compared to his family. Whenever I've brought this up, their family laughs it off, saying, "He's just being a teenager." For comparison, I'm close to my cousins, some of whom are around the same age as my boyfriend's brother, and they have always been respectful toward my boyfriend. If they ever crossed a line, I've addressed it immediately because I expect respect from them, and I expect the same from my boyfriend when it comes to his brother's behavior toward me. My suggestions. I proposed that his brother could stay with us until he turns 18, but after that, he should move out when he starts college. If my boyfriend is worried about him, I suggested we could help him find a place nearby, like an apartment next door, so my husband and I can still have our privacy. But my boyfriend rejected this idea. Where we stand. We've had numerous arguments about this, and my boyfriend refuses to compromise. I finally told him that if, after we're married, I can't have privacy and time alone with my husband, then I'm not comfortable continuing this relationship. My boyfriend accused me of trying to keep him away from his family and said I don't understand the value of family because I'm an only child. That accusation deeply hurt me. After thinking long and hard, I've concluded that if we can't agree on this, it's best to break up and go our separate ways. When I told him this, he accused me of giving him an ultimatum. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for refusing to let my boyfriend's brother stay with us after we get married? Am I the asshole for not giving my sibling a ride? I, 18M, am a senior in high school, and for the past 2 years, I've been giving my twin sibling, 18, a ride to school since I got my license. Recently, I got a new job as a janitor working 30 hours a week, and I'm also taking college classes. It's been a lot to juggle, and I'm often tired, but I'm trying to save up money to move out and get my sibling, my boyfriend, 18M, and I a place away from our parents. Recently, I got senior leave, so I no longer have a last period and can leave early. This is great because I can use that extra hour to work on college assignments, which really helps me stay on top of things. The problem is, my sibling doesn't have senior leave and now has to walk home after school. We live about a 5-minute walk from the school, and we used to walk together every day before I got my license. They're upset that I'm making them walk now, even though I've explained how important it is for me to have the extra time to focus on my schoolwork and work. I do feel bad because the weather's getting cold, and I don't like that they have to walk in it. I've also tried to be helpful by requesting them a locker for coats and warm clothes so they don't have to carry everything around all day. To be fair, my sibling did pay for half of our parking pass, but since I'm graduating mid-year, I'll pass it off to them for the rest of the semester, which I think is a fair trade-off. But I'm wondering if I'm being unreasonable in not giving them a ride now, especially since they've been really upset about it. Here's some extra context. My sibling has their own license and car but would need to buy a new parking pass for it, which seems silly since they'll only need it for about a month before I graduate and hand over my pass. The car we're using belongs to our parents, but I make payments to buy it from them. My sibling has some medical conditions that can make walking long distances painful, but I don't think it would affect the 5-minute walk much. They're autistic and struggle with change, which is probably why they're upset about this change in routine. I know I've been a bit overprotective at times, but I do care about them a lot, and they often rely on me for things like cooking since they won't do it themselves. They don't have friends to ask for a ride, and they work maybe 6 hours a week, so they don't have a ton of money to pay for alternatives. I could technically stay in the library for my last period to give them a ride, but I find it really distracting. I have ADHD, and I'd rather go home to nap and eat since I'm not getting much sleep these days. As for alternating who drives or walks, my car is the one registered with the school, and no other cars are allowed to be used with it. They can't drive my car because of some physical limitations they have that require alterations to a vehicle. I volunteered to support my sibling and boyfriend, but they didn't ask me to do this. They're both planning to go to college, while I'm planning on going straight into a career after graduation. I'm doing this because I want them to be able to focus on their studies without worrying about things like transportation. So, AITA for not giving my sibling a ride? Am I being too demanding, or is my sibling being unreasonable? Would I be the asshole for planning to leave the restaurant that I own with my dad? Some background. I, 28M, and my dad, 59M, co-own a pizzeria together. However, my girlfriend of 2 years, Emily, 29F, wants me to quit, and both my mom, 56F, and sister, 32F, agree with her. The issue is that my dad and Emily absolutely hate each other. Emily tells me that my dad has been taking advantage of me, using me as almost free labor. She says that whenever I'm out doing deliveries, he talks poorly about me. I can only take her word for it, as I've never been present during these times. She claims that when I do something wrong, he belittles me, but when I do something right, he completely ignores it and focuses on my mistakes instead. According to my sister, I've been so conditioned to this behavior over the years that I don't even notice it anymore. Emily jokes that if I were to leave, the restaurant would collapse within months. On the other hand, my dad believes that Emily is only with me because I own the restaurant. He says she speaks badly about him to people. In our city, although I've never witnessed that myself unless someone specifically brings him up, I've been working at the pizzeria for 11 years without a salary. When I needed money, I would ask my dad for it, and that was just how it was. This only changed about a year ago when Emily insisted that I start asking to be paid. When I first brought up the subject of getting paid to my dad, he became upset and aggressive. He accused me of being ungrateful, claiming he's building the business for me and reminding me that his own father never left him anything. He also points out that I have a nice car, which he bought me, and a house that I will inherit from him, saying that I'm very lucky and that others think so too. Eventually, he agreed to pay me, but at only €400 a month. Recently, I asked for a raise since I'm looking to further my education to improve my resume. I'm supposed to get €600 per month now, but the minimum wage here is €820, and he says the €220 difference is for rent, which I think is a reasonable explanation. After talking with my mom and sister, I've come to realize that my dad is very controlling when it comes to money. For example, my mom's paycheck is controlled by him. He uses it to pay the pizzeria's staff and for any necessary purchases. Whenever my mom needs something, she has to ask my dad for money, and he gets irritated when she does. I also found out that the €1,600 I inherited from my grandma was used to pay electricity bills for the pizzeria without my consent. At this point, I don't want to live like my dad, stressed out, unsure if I'll have enough money to pay the staff, and working myself into an early grave. So, would I be the asshole for planning to leave the restaurant? Am I the asshole for not taking my cousin to a Christmas show? Last year, I took my 7-year-old niece, Emma, to a Christmas play at a local community theater. Emma had asked to go, and her mother, Lisa, my sister, doesn't really enjoy those kinds of events. So I offered to take Emma as her Christmas present. Lisa agreed, and we picked a date that worked, and I got the tickets. The day of the play came, we saw the show, got some souvenirs, and I took Emma out for dinner afterward. She had an amazing time. Since the show was before Christmas, I didn't bring a gift for Emma when Christmas Day came around. We went to Lisa's for dinner, but I didn't think to bring anything extra for Emma. The play was her Christmas present. After dinner, Lisa pulled me aside and chastised me for not bringing a gift for Emma. I was confused and said, "But the show was Emma's gift. She looked at me with disgust and told me I was incredibly rude and that I didn't understand children. I'm not a parent myself. I felt like Lisa was overreacting, but I didn't want to argue, so I just stepped away, had some dessert, and left. For the record, Emma didn't seem upset at all about not receiving a gift from me. She had plenty of other gifts from Santa, her grandparents, and other relatives. It wasn't even mentioned again. When Emma's birthday came around in the spring, I just brought a toy to the party. I didn't offer to do something special with her because I was still a little annoyed by Lisa's behavior. The toy was just added to the pile with all her other gifts. A couple of weeks ago, Lisa asked if I could take Emma to this year's Christmas show. Honestly, I don't want to do it. I'm still upset by how Lisa acted last year. I think she was rude and condescending, and I don't want to spend another couple of $100s on a gift for a 7-year-old, only to be expected to bring another one on Christmas Day. So, I told Lisa I wasn't available, but I'd be happy to pass along the ticket information so she or her husband could take Emma. She was surprised but said, "Oh, okay." And that was the end of it. Haven't heard anything about it since. I plan to bring Emma a $25 toy on Christmas Day, just to avoid being criticized again. I'm sure it will just end up in the pile of other toys. Honestly, I don't care. Part of me feels guilty because Emma had such a great time last year, but I also feel like I'm being petty. Emma will still get a gift, and if she really wants to go to the play, her parents can take her. Am I the asshole for not taking Emma to the Christmas show this year? Am I the asshole for asking my ex-housemate to show receipts for miscellaneous expenses? I used to live with a housemate, Sandra, who had to leave quite suddenly due to a job falling through and visa issues. I also had to move out shortly after because I couldn't find someone to replace her in the room. Our arrangement was that Sandra would cover the electricity, I would pay for the internet and water, and we'd split the cost of cleaning supplies, including the cleaner we hired bi-weekly, evenly. We kept track of all the expenses on Splitwise. Sandra moved out at the end of September, and now it's December. I've been chasing her since the end of October to settle up, as our lease officially ended and we had a few small things to finalize. Sandra kept saying she needed to update the Splitwise for the cleaning supplies and miscellaneous things she had purchased earlier in the year and had forgotten to add. She even sent me a picture of a bundle of receipts in a Ziploc bag, but the photo was unreadable. After weeks of follow-ups and her promises to do it tomorrow or this week for sure, Sandra finally uploaded a bulk entry to Splitwise, claiming over $250 worth of cleaning and miscellaneous expenses. I was shocked because, as far as I knew, I was the one who usually bought most of the cleaning supplies, per the cleaner's requests. Sandra never went to the store because, frankly, she couldn't cook to save her life. I asked her to clarify what miscellaneous meant, and she accused me of implying she was lying about the expenses. However, she still hasn't provided any specific receipts. To make matters worse, I recently called the electricity company and found out that the $900 electricity bill, for 2 months, hasn't been paid, despite Sandra marking it as paid on Splitwise. Apparently, she forgot to pay it, and the last recorded payment was in July. I haven't brought this issue up yet because the bill is in her name, but it's definitely making me question everything. At this point, I'm just exhausted from constantly chasing her for payment and trying to get clarity. Honestly, the amount of money involved is relatively small, only a couple of $100s, but I'm starting to get frustrated because it's not just about the money anymore. It's about the principle of the thing, especially given all the lies and excuses. The situation is complicated further by the fact that we're now in different countries and time zones, so it makes it even more difficult to resolve. So, am I the asshole for asking my ex-housemate to show receipts for the miscellaneous expenses? Or should I just let it go, since it's such a small amount in the grand scheme of things? Am I the asshole for telling my friend he needed to manage his expectations when I found out what he put on his job application? So here's the situation. The other day, my roommate got fired from his job. For some context, he was making $24 an hour as a department manager. When I heard about it, I went to my own manager to see if there were any open positions in the area that he could apply for. My manager told me about a store that was hiring, which was only about 10 minutes away from where we live. She's met my friend before and likes him, so she said if he applied, she'd tell the manager at the other store to look out for his application and even put in a good word for him. I thought this was a great opportunity, so I passed the message along to my friend, and he said he would apply. While he was filling out the application, he called me to ask what a reasonable pay expectation would be. They ask for a pay range on the application. I told him the top of the pay scale for the job he was applying for was $17 an hour, but the job also offers a 50-hour work week, which guarantees about 10 hours of overtime each week. So, if he asked for $16 an hour, he would be making around $20 an hour for a standard 40-hour work week. I thought this was a fair suggestion. However, when he called me later, he told me he put down $20 an hour as his expectation because, in his words, his pride wouldn't let him go any lower, and he didn't feel like working the extra 10 hours. I was honestly kind of annoyed by this because not only was my manager and I trying to help him out by putting in a good word, but he completely ignored all the advice I gave him. I told him that, even with us backing him up, he probably wasn't going to get a call back because his pay expectation was way out of the range for the position. At this point, his girlfriend overheard and started yelling at me for tearing him down and not letting him shoot his shot. I told her he needed to manage his expectations. He was coming from a management position, applying for a non-management role, and the pay he was asking for was much higher than what was realistically being offered. If he wanted the same pay he had before, I suggested he should look for a management position and not take advantage of the help I was offering. Now, I'm sitting here thinking that maybe I was too harsh on him. I was just trying to help him out, but I'm starting to wonder if I went about it the wrong way and shouldn't have said what I did. Was I too critical of him? Or was I just being honest? Am I the asshole for uninviting a guest to my Christmas party? I, 31F, have been planning and hosting a Christmas party at my house. I've already decided on the theme, the time, the menu, and all the details. I invited my husband's stepmom, Amy, who is in her 30s, and her 4 to 5-year-old daughter to join us for the event. I sent her all the information, including the party start time at 11:30 a.m., the theme, and the menu. A few days later, we started discussing the party further, and Amy asked me if my parents would be attending. I explained that we already had a set guest list, and unfortunately, we couldn't add any more people, since we didn't have enough food or space for additional guests. She told me she wouldn't be able to make it at 11:30, but would arrive after noon, so she could spend some time with her parents first. I said that was fine, but that the party would be starting at 11:30 regardless. Then, things got a little more complicated. Amy told me she was going to bring food to the party: ham, mashed potatoes, cornbread, stuffing, and dessert. While I appreciated the gesture, I told her we already had turkey and 5 large side dishes prepared and that we didn't need another full meal. I said she was welcome to bring a dessert or maybe a side dish, but we didn't need the whole spread. She responded that she was just trying to help. The conversation about the party kept going on, and she continued to suggest things like having her daughter decorate our tree and wanting to know more about the theme and the food. I started to feel uncomfortable because it felt like I was losing control over the party that I had been planning for weeks. I spoke to a friend of hers, who suggested that I set clearer boundaries with Amy. So I did. This morning, I reached out to Amy and told her that I needed to know what time she planned to arrive, so we wouldn't start the kid games without her, and that I only wanted her to bring one dish, as we already had the food covered. She told me that she still wanted to bring the food, but would have us cook it instead. I explained that we just didn't have enough space for more food or decorations. Then, she mentioned bringing some decorations for the party to make it more festive, but I reminded her that the theme was already set, a gingerbread Grinch party, and I had already planned the decorations. At this point, she said she would back off and that she just wanted to be helpful, especially since they were moving in a couple of months and wanted to contribute. I told her that I appreciated the sentiment but had been planning the party for weeks, and that I just wanted to keep things simple. She then said she would show up around 1 p.m., stay for a little while, and leave early. I finally told her that, respectfully, it was my party and my house, and I had been putting a lot of effort into the planning and preparation. I said that if there was going to be any issues, maybe it would be best if she reconsidered coming. I told her that I'd love for her to come, but I didn't want any problems while I was decorating and cooking everything. Her friend later told me that I was being a jerk for not accepting her help and for uninviting her, saying she was just trying to be kind and helpful since they were moving away soon. Now I'm wondering if I took things too far. Was I wrong to set such strict boundaries and uninvite her? Did I go overboard by not letting her bring anything or take part in the party preparations? Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for canceling Christmas with my in-laws? My husband is amazing, and I'm incredibly happy with him. However, there's a major issue I'm struggling with. I can't stand his mother and brother. They've always treated him poorly, and it's something that has always bothered me. While we've worked hard to build a great life together, buying a